I think that that's probably where like a lot of the origin, a lot of the secret societies come from. I know these mystery schools are even older than that, but I think that that sort of makes sense that if you do have a kind of an overall Christian Western world, that they would need to be secret because you can't worship Apollo, you can't worship the old gods anymore. I mean, literally, the Roman emperors made them illegal. They outlawed paganism under like Theodosius the First.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the show. Got a good one planned for you today. Excited to get into it with my guest today. Returning once again, he is the host of JT's Mixtape. He is the one and only JT Follows JC. JT, thanks for coming on, man.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, thanks for inviting me back on. It's been always a great conversation with you, Tim.
Always, yeah. You and I could just talk forever, man, and I love it, man. It's been too long. I'm happy to have you back. Tell everybody anything I may have missed about you and the work you do.
Oh gosh, I mean, if you guys are not aware of me, yeah, so my name is JT Follows JC, JT being my initials, Jesus Christ being the JC in the name. And yeah, just a truther. I'm a regular guy who likes to do my own research. I like to talk about all the interesting things I see and I hear, and I like to look for symbolism in things. I like to watch a lot of TV shows and movies, and I love exploring ancient mysteries. I like kind of, I don't know, like I'm kind of a history nerd, but now I don't really believe a lot of the history. But I like looking, I like gleaning truth from every place that you can and kind of trying to fit this puzzle together that's a little unclear. We might be missing a few pieces here and there. And so, but I think that's kind of part of the fun of doing these podcasts is like having conversations with different people. So, yeah, like on my channel, we talk about lots of different things, everything from kind of a biblical perspective. I like to talk about Satan's little season. Everyone's been bringing me on to talk about that, but I could talk about a million other things. I like talking about Nephilim, angels, giants. I like talking about, yeah, the megaliths. I like weird pyramid stuff. I like every bit of all
Yeah.
this stuff that kind of Tim talks about.
Yeah, that's man, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I love that stuff too. I love what you were saying beforehand too about going back and like we find what we can that is to put the pieces together to see a bigger picture of the past.
Hmm.
It's like it's really hard because there's so many things that have been obfuscated from us. But yeah, actually I'm glad you're talking about that a little bit. There's something I wanted to I want to take us back to something we talked about before real quick because America is such a final frontier of archaeology, but also weirdness. And I wanted to
Hmm.
revisit this picture real quick and show you something. You may have seen this, you may already know about it, but I found something new and it's too weird. I got to remember when we did the show and we talked about
Oh
this
yeah, that's
picture.
Seattle.
Yeah. So
So
this is
crazy.
this is such a crazy picture. But okay. I may have pointed this out last time, but this time you see this building back here in the back
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That building.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. That's very odd for a picture from the early 1900s or late 1800s. Very odd.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I found another one just like it in Buffalo.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm going to show you that real quick. This right here. This looks to me looks just like it with the
Oh yeah,
this.
you're right. Yeah, because I was thinking because that building that you were showing in that picture of Seattle, it doesn't really have the normal old world vibe because a lot of
No.
the old world buildings have so much character. And that almost looked like almost that brutalism style of architecture where it's all blocks and squares and you don't see the rotundas, you don't see the domes, you don't see the antiquitech, you don't see the columns. But yeah, that actually does. That actually fits. That looks I agree. It
And
does look similar.
I see you're already on top of it, man. Antiquitech. I'm thinking about that when I look at this because what are these things right here that have circular objects up top? They look like big columns with some rivets here, and then you've got these big circle balls that might be metallic. I don't know, the way the sun is shining on them
Mm.
is interesting. This makes me wonder like if this was some sort of a power station.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? If and I'm sure you've seen these images of those old radium fireplaces, and then they each a lot of times they had these weird kind of like little balls or pillars like somewhere around the radium
Yeah.
fireplace, where it does seem like, yeah, I mean, you could
Mm,
imagine like electricity bouncing off between those things.
I see what yes, exactly. That thing, this looks like something that would bring down, or I could see, like you said, like electricity being shared back and forth between these
Hmm.
circular balls. I'll show everybody the other building in Seattle again too. It's in the background. Look, there's another one right here in the center.
Hmm.
You can still see it's got that shape, and it's a little darker and it's way back there. But here it is again. And it just, what were they doing building these style buildings back in the day? Or who knows how long it had been there, right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, yeah, I guess all you can really say about that whole picture in general, it's like none of it makes sense based on what we're told. It
Yeah.
looks crazy. It looks like, yeah, like where did all this dirt come from? Like, why are they? It's all stacked in piles. I mean, is this literally just a giant excavation of this place?
Yeah.
Is that what this is? It's
That's what
it's it's truly bizarre.
I'm leaning towards that. What were they doing on either side of the country too, with the same style building in these horse and buggy days?
Hmm.
So we're told, this that looks like something out of a modern city. What's it doing here? And yeah, to your question, what are they doing here? Is this an excavation? Because that's what it seems like. Seems like they're transporting dirt around,
Yeah, it
or
just
I don't
seems
even
like
know.
that. It seems like that those are what you're seeing in between those giant columns of dirt is like as a path that's been carved out.
Yeah.
But like that wasn't like those aren't natural. Those things got,
No.
somebody excavated. It almost looks like they excavated part of it and like that was left over.
Yeah. Yeah. This one is confounding. I still have a lot of questions. Here's another one from Buffalo, real quick, just to show, since we're none of these buildings I don't think are there anymore. This one is not there anymore.
It's funny. I just shared on my Instagram account, actually on X and Facebook too. It was it was like the electricity building. I think the electric tower. I believe that's what it was called in
Okay.
Buffalo.
Okay.
And it was for the Pan American Exposition in 1901. And of course, I'm watching that. I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm reading the caption there. And so supposedly it was a temporary building built for this World Fair, but it's 410 feet. So it's like a 40-story hotel. It's like a 40-story building. And I said, I don't care what they tell you. You don't build 410-foot buildings to be temporary, to tear them down after 6 months. It's like it's not possible to build something like what they would tell you would be is something akin to like a Hollywood set. Something that big has got to be have all the structural members that any other building would need to have. Because there,
Hmm.
the narrative goes that there's thousands of people going in and out of these buildings. Like, why would you build something so big just to tear it down afterwards? The building was not temporary. The building was there. Now, if they
Yeah.
tore it down afterwards, you can say it was temporary because they always intended to tear it down. But if they didn't, it would still be there today.
That's what I like about that one I was just showing, because you can see how small the cars are compared. There's well, I say cars. They're horses and horse and buggy, but this looks like a blurry car down there. I'm not
Hmm.
sure what that is, but look, you see the size of the people and the size of these buildings. Like, how many people are working at this place? Why does it
And look,
need to be
look
that
already at the
big?
bottom, you can kind of see like the mud flooded, like the partial windows
Yeah,
below those balconies. And
always
again,
with the partial windows.
yeah, and then you obviously there's stairs up to the first floor. When I said it's really funny because it's like they don't build buildings like that anymore. I mean, we build houses with crawl spaces, but I mean, obviously they have a very specific purpose. But when you see them build modern buildings, guess where the door is? It's right at the sidewalk level. They don't build them with stairs going up to the first floor. And
Mhm.
yet all these old buildings, they always have stairs up there because Yes, the bottom floor is likely under the ground.
Well,
And this is
that
this is either like the second or the third floor.
that's what I say about moving dirt around from the old Seattle picture. It's like they brought in dirt or something. And I'm not saying this is what they did. I'm just theorizing. But it's almost like they brought in something and brought the level higher because it's just been built over so many times. They say that Rome has risen 30 feet since the empire fell back in the 5th century AD because there's 30, think about that, 30 feet of layers of city that are just built on top of each other to where now you're like 30 feet up from the original uh, streets.
Yeah,
There might be some of
absolutely.
that going on here too, right?
Yeah, here, can I share you this picture that I was mentioning so that people have a clue what we're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So this is here's the post that I did over on Instagram. And it says the Electric Tower is at once the centerpiece and crowning architectural glory of the Pan American Exposition. It represents the power of the elements, especially the mysterious force of electricity, hence the appropriateness of the making of its conspicuous feature in the Pan American Exposition at Buffalo, whose commercial prosperity was largely due to waters of the Great Lakes, and this got extracted, generated by the Niagara. The tower is 410 foot high from its base to the tip of the torch and the goddess of light. So just look at that thing. I mean, it's kind of like this the ultimate gaslighting saying that's a temporary building.
Oh, they have a goddess up there too. That's
Oh, yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of these buildings, especially if they're represented of any kind of electricity, a lot of them have a god or an angel reaching up to the
Mm-hmm.
heavens on them.
Good, good find. Yeah, this is interesting. Buffalo's a really good one that I don't hear people talk about a lot.
Oh
It
yeah.
is a
Well, everybody gives all the focuses all the attention on Chicago and St. Louis. Rightfully so. Those are crazy. But yeah, Buffalo has some of the most interesting buildings from when you see like these pictures from 1901.
hmm
And like I said, I mean, you can't convince me that what I'm looking at isn't an old building. It just looks like it's got age to it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's me reading too much into the picture, but it looks like the way that looks like there's weathering on the stone. There's darker areas and partially areas are not as dark. I don't know. I think a lot of these buildings from these world fairs, like especially when they talk about Chicago being the white city, I think
Yeah.
what they did was I think that these buildings were old and then they painted them and then, hey, look, they all look brand new. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so the timeline of construction makes more sense if all they were really doing was slapping a coat of paint on these buildings and maybe fixing them up a little bit, moving all the exhibits into these great buildings. But building those buildings from scratch, no way, no how. Not only that, it's when you see all these fountains and these giant bridges going over these waterways and stuff like that. I'm telling you, like that kind of process to create all that stuff, you could not do that in a short amount of time. And you would
Yeah.
definitely not do it only to destroy it later because it's already there. Like, like once you have it there, like that's what I said. I think that what people have told us and it does not fit is they say, "Oh, it's kind of like back in the day they did this just like today when, LA gets the Olympics." And then they build a bunch of infrastructure in for this upcoming Olympics, every 2 to 4 years. Okay, so if that's true, why can I go to what is it, Lake Placid in New York right now and go see all the old buildings that they built for that Olympics? They didn't demo them, they used them later.
Yeah.
And then they turned them into like an Olympic training facility or something. That's always
That's
what they do is like that, hey, we're going to need an arena to play this game in it. So guess what? They keep the arena and then they use it for all kinds of things like concerts and sports after the fact. Because you don't build stuff just to tear it down. You put up tents or something.
for sure. Then something I've heard about San Diego as well. They say there's like a famous park in San Diego that still has
It's like
some of the old.
Balboa Park, I think.
Yes, Balboa Park, where they still have. It sounds like you know more about this than I do, but stuff that is left over from the World's Fair or something that was
Hmm.
there. Have you ever? I don't know if you've heard me talk about this, or I know
No,
I
I've
haven't talked
never.
to you about this yet, but
Mm.
this is. This is this book I got a hold of probably since we last talked. And this guy, he worked for the Smithsonian, and he actually says that they were finding ruins over here. Like the French were coming through early. This is like within the 1500s to the 1700s, somewhere around that time.
Oh, interesting.
They were finding ruins of buildings, and he admits to it. They don't like talking about this guy. He was one of the
What
guys. I
what
think
year
he
was
walked
that?
the line.
What year was that book written or originally published?
It was published in 94.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, he was the director of the National Park Service and the director of American History, the American History Museum at the Smithsonian. And he's written a lot of books. And when you look him up, last time we looked him up on Wikipedia, they didn't mention this book conveniently. They mentioned his other books.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
but
Well,
but
that
I
does not
was
fit. It is interesting you bring that up because I recently I'm kind of at the end of this book. I started reading a book called American Antiquities and Discoveries in the West.
oh
Yeah, it's really interesting. So this book was originally published in 1833 by Josiah Priest, and it kind of particularly is focused on the mound culture that was already here, and then it starts to theorize like where did these mounds come from because at this time nobody believes that the Native Americans that they're encountering, that the Europeans encountered after they started to colonize America, they don't believe that they built these mounds because what they find in those mounds is they find copper and bronze. They find tools that the Native Americans don't have. So then they're theorizing these things don't fit with these people, and also that the amount of Indians or Native Americans they found don't justify all the mounds in America. And so this is coming back from like 1833. So it's I just thought that kind of the perspective is interesting too, is because like we've been sort of conditioned or taught since we were kids that they know all about this place that the Europeans settled. But in 1833, it's like it was normal to speculate about lots of this stuff because nobody really knows like who these people were. And of course, it gets into the idea that a lot of the people that came over from the western part of America were Tartars and Malays, and then you had Norwegians, you had like the Norse people, they came over. These people coming over well before 1492. It was kind of just like a known
right.
thing that they talked about this is like who were these people, but yeah, they found like Hindu type relics in some of these mounds, weird things like Christian iconography mixed with Hindu stuff. It's really, really weird.
Hmm.
But I think that, yeah, the Smithsonian and people like that have really put a veil over this stuff because they say, oh, well, we can't dig into these mounds now because it's all related to Indians, the Native Americans here. And therefore, it gives them cover for them not to dig too much further. But I want to say, yeah, that there was a farmer who they said in his field, they were bringing up, I want to say it was, I think it was copper iron, like armor, like breastplates
Yeah.
and shields and helmets and stuff. And they were saying in this one guy's field, he had 800 pounds of copper armor that he turned into scrap. And he said back in those days, nobody even blinked an eye.
Yeah. That's
Like
that's what
who
I
were those
like.
people? It was obviously was not the Native Americans that the Europeans talked about didn't have armor like that. They didn't wear
Yeah.
armor at all.
That's what I like about that book over there is that he talks about how there were these ruins, these buildings were there alongside of the mounds. It's both, it's both.
Hmm.
And it's certainly like what you're saying as well. Like there's these other groups of people that were over here. I mean, you've got the Phoenicians. Of course, I know you know about them.
Hmm.
And you've got Copper Harbor in Michigan. There's a petroglyph of a Minoan style ship there. Minoans, Phoenicians, they're both closely related. They might come from the same people group. They're both people who inhabited islands on the Mediterranean. They both were seafaring people. So you've got that Minoan ship up there. The Native Americans definitely didn't carve a Minoan style ship on this
Mm-mm.
rock. Or if they did, it was they were observing that ship coming from over from the Mediterranean. But you've got the Newberry tablet that's got the Minoan script that was found in Michigan. You've got Barry Fell found some Ogham script on an island in Lake Michigan, and it indicated that when they transcribed it, it said that there was a Phoenician port there. Phoenicians
Hmm.
from Tyre, Grave Creek Mound, West Virginia, Phoenician tablets, and of course we know Phoenicians were Canaanites, so we very quickly merge into a discussion about the Nephilim at this point
Hmm.
because when you bring the Canaanites in, but yeah, there were so many different groups of people coming over here.
We're talking high mineral sea salts today and why they are a heart healthy choice for you. The higher the minerals in your sea salt, the lower the sodium and chloride, which is therefore going to make your salt a heart healthy salt. It's also going to ensure that you get better effects on things like energy production, cholesterol numbers, all these different types of things that people struggle with are mineral imbalance. Just like any machine in the world, we need the right ratios to run it. So we don't just need to take good things, we need to make sure it has the right balance of those things. And if you look at other salts like Redmond and Celtic and other ones that people are using, mostly kosher, Morton's and stuff, they don't have the mineral balance that we do in ours. Theirs is going to be almost non-existent in potassium, and although Celtic has pretty decent numbers on magnesium, it doesn't have the right ratios that we're looking for, and a lot of them have higher calcium, which shuts down the absorption of magnesium if it gets too high. So when we're talking heart healthy and when we're talking the best for your body, we're talking a high mineral sea salt. You can check it out on modernrootslife.com.
Yeah, in this book, it was theorizing that people started to come over to America, whether by land or sea, after the Tower of Babel. It's almost like right from the beginning, people were
Wow.
coming over here. I mean, of course, again, these are not like necessarily facts, but this is the theories that if people started to spread out around the earth, well, why couldn't they get here? Because even mainstream history talks about the Bering Strait being able to be walked across and then walking into America. So, based on all the research I've done, I believe that there was very advanced people like the Phoenicians who could sail across the seas. They could sail all the way around Africa, so they could clearly sail across the Atlantic. And I mean, it is funny to really think about it that you have these Norse people and they sailed from if they can get to Iceland, they can get to Greenland. If you can get to Greenland, you can get to Newfoundland. It's not even that like it's really not that far by sea if you go around the northern part. But at the same time, there's like accounts from like even like the Greeks going into the Atlantic Ocean and then having them get blown off course and they end up landing in someplace over in South America.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's crazy to think that these people who are super advanced empires, they didn't have the ability to go across the ocean on a boat.
Oh
Of
yeah,
course that they did. So,
of
but
course they did.
also I also believe in the fact that whatever maps look like today is not what the Earth looked like back then. So there's obviously lots of room for places like Lemuria, right? The land of Mu. You have the mythologies about Atlantis. So what if they're again, like you see, if you go around the northern hemisphere, you see all these islands you could hop back and forth across to get over to North America. What if there was also islands that are under the ocean that were once exposed and there are people who live there? I think that all of those things are very possible because I think that the mainstream story about like islands like Easter Island, how they were populated, who got there? I mean, it's kind of like that's always kind of like the thing that really I don't know, it just makes you think, okay, so if people could get to Easter Island, which is like the most remote place on the whole earth, well, they could easily get to South America and North America.
That makes total sense. Of course.
Like, how
And
could you, like, you know what I mean? Because, like, it's weird to think that you could get there if you didn't know it was there.
yeah, I'm with you
You look at
for
the
sure.
Pacific Ocean, it's pretty big. I mean, like, those little islands out there, it's like, how could you get there if you didn't know it was there?
Yeah, a
I think these
lot
people
of
knew that, I think people knew about these islands. I think they knew about these continents.
yeah, a lot of the legends in South America, especially the ones in Peru, on the West Coast, all those people have legends of their ancestors coming from boats,
Hmm.
coming across the Pacific. So what you're saying makes it. Of course, they were seafaring. Like going back to the Tower of Babel thing, you're saying like if that's what I think it was, and it was some sort of a portal up there, they were trying to enter into another realm. They're probably trying to enter into the spiritual realm. If you ask me, if they could do that, they could build a boat. I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm probably, mainstream archaeology does not acknowledge that things like I believe that I think that the greatest megaliths that we see today were antediluvian. I think that those were pre-flood, relics, those buildings with the trilithon stones, the giant stones at Baalbek, and all the stuff in Peru, Sacsayhuaman. You go into ancient Egypt. Yeah, those things seem like that's a different type of construction style, and it seems like that maybe that was the thing that was lost after the flood. So mainstream history doesn't acknowledge a flood. So they're not even looking at this broken period that separates knowledge from the ancients to us today. But if you don't acknowledge that, well, then these people who built all these structures, they could sure as heck build a watertight boat. I mean, that seems very simple compared to like when you see what the unfinished obelisk in Egypt, and it's absolutely ridiculously huge. Like if you could build that, like what kind of boat could you build?
I know.
Whatever kind of boat. I mean, because I guess the truth is, we're told about how the Polynesians got to different places, and they didn't have big boats. So you don't even need necessarily a big boat to get someplace. But I do think you need a big boat or you need knowledge of a place to colonize a place. Because we're not just talking about some one-off explorers that got lost and found Easter Island. We're talking about that they brought their children, they brought their women there. Or
You want
they
to
at
get
least
real?
brought women because they
You want to
lived
get
there.
want to get real crazy? They may have been using some magic, or at least they had some sort of. I don't know how they found land, but they may have been using divination for that. That's out there. That's way out there. But even John Dee had that obsidian scrying mirror that he got from an older culture. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, no, I mean, I think all theories are worth entertaining, but I do think that it's also possible that they had some kind of a flying ship. Like
Oh
airships are,
yeah.
if you really think about it, airships are not as complicated as people make them out to be. If they could realize that certain gases are lighter than air and you could fill up some kind of a container, then you could float. I mean, because the funny thing is, like, I live really close to like where the first flight was. Like, I'm about an hour and a half from where the Wright brothers memorial is. And
Hmm.
so, they supposedly flew in like the early 1900s. That's the first flight. Well, that's the first airplane flight, we're told. But they had airships back in the 1700s that I want to say that this is what history tells us. I mean, it might be earlier than this. That you have people going across the English Channel in like 1700.
Hmm.
So that's a long time ago. And so if you think about it, how did, like, for what purpose when you get to those Nazca lines? Like, what are the point of those if you can't see them from the air?
Hmm.
So you kind of wonder, those being in South America, I mean, obviously pretty far, everything's pretty far from Easter Island, but if they had some way of viewing those Nazca lines from the air, well, then maybe that's how they found some islands.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever built those Moai statues in Easter Island, they had some technology. Have you seen those? I want to say very recently, people started showing some of the images of the other side of the island where they had almost had like this industrial process of pulling the Moai statues like straight from these mountains. Like they were building lots of them at one time.
Yeah.
And then once
Yeah.
again, it's very similar to the way that, yeah, you have the unfinished obelisk in Egypt, where I don't understand one bit how they carved three sides of this obelisk, and then the other side is still completely attached to the bedrock. And then when you look at each side, like how much room do you have to maneuver? Like how did they ever intend to get it out and lift it up? How did they ever intend to separate from the bedrock? But that's exactly how those Moai statues were being, basically produced in some kind of a manufacturing way. Like they carved three sides of it, but it's still attached to the bedrock.
Yeah.
So what kind of technology did they have to do that? And for what reason were they putting up all these statues that were, hundreds of tons?
Yeah. They had something. Have you ever heard of King Solomon's airship?
I haven't. No, it's funny. I'm
Okay.
reading the Testament of Solomon
I
again. We're
I,
doing a
I
study on
know.
that.
I know because this is kind of interesting. I was going to, if we had time, I was going to talk about Solomon with you today because you're
Okay,
doing
yeah,
this. I've listened to all three of the episodes that you did. I think I've listened to three of them. Maybe you did
yeah.
one. And
We've Josh has been unavailable,
awesome.
so so I need to get him back so we can continue on
Those
the
are
study.
those are good. We'll bookmark that. I'll show you King Solomon's flying machine. Okay. Here's I've got an old article about it from the 1900s.
Oh, interesting.
1907, Solomon's flying machine. Here's the deal with this. I found so there's some scriptures, some ancient scriptures that talk about this, and they talk about how the great Hebrew king was the owner of a marvelous ancient airship, and this is in a book called Kebra Nagast. That
Hmm.
means glory of the kings. It's an old important like Ethiopian document. And in the glory of the kings, they talk about how King Solomon was visited by the Queen of Sheba,
Hmm.
who crossed the Red Sea. This was like present day Yemen, and they would go. She would go up to Jerusalem to visit King Solomon, and it says here that her goal, according to the text, her goal was to see the important Ark of the Covenant, and she was fascinated by stories of King Solomon's wisdom that had reached her country. She stayed with the Hebrew king for some months. Then she returned back to her own kingdom and gave birth to King Solomon's son, Menelik the First. According to the Kebra Nagast, King Solomon would visit Makeda and his son Menelik by flying in a heavenly car. The king and all who obeyed his word flew on the wagon without pain and suffering, without sweat or exhaustion, and traveled in one day a distance which took 3 months to traverse on foot. So that's the legend according to the Kebra Nagast. This is what people still hold on to in 1907 in the Hebrew Standard. And I'm not going to read this whole thing here, but let me see if I can find a good spot to.
I think it starts talking about a magic carpet.
Yeah, this one, it's like the legend of it had grown its own mythology, and
Hmm.
I think by the time you get to 1907, they think that this thing was some sort of a giant carpet. But in the Kebra Nagast, I got the impression that it was more of an airship. So okay, so here's 1907. It says when King Solomon wished to make a journey, the carpet was spread. I cannot tell you where it was spread because you see it required a big space, but I suppose this space was near the king's palace. Then the king's throne was placed on the carpet, and he took his seat attended by all his forces. Immediately by the throne stood the king's four lieutenants, the prince of men, the prince of demons, a lion as the prince of Bestra, and an eagle as the prince of birds. King Solomon. So it's like he's getting on this carpet and mingling with these spiritual beings at this point. King Solomon is supposed to have reigned over the spirits and the animals and the birds, and there were many spirits on the carpet. They stood on his left, and the human beings stood on his right. When all was in order, King Solomon gave the word of command. Arise, you spirits of the winds, he cried, and do my bidding. Waft this carpet and all that is upon it through the air to the place which it is my desire to go. Then gently the carpet rose in the air, and with wondrous rapidity, and yet without any sense of motion, it flew through the air faster than any bird could fly. And you know some birds can travel faster than railway trains or motor cars. The sun was strong. The magic birds flew overhead with wings outspread to form a canopy that they kept the hot rays from the king. So he's got some like supernatural shade going on and everything. Yeah. So in this one, it's more of a carpet. Now, the flying carpet of King Solomon's was one of the same kind, only much bigger and much more wonderful. It was one of the wonders of fairyland. One writer says it was 8,000 square miles in extent. This is half as big as Wells. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but you get the point.
Well, I mean, in the like in the ancient Hindu texts, they often talk about what these Vimnanas that
Yes.
are flying machines.
Yes.
So super old
See,
stuff, but you kind of do wonder where some of these, because I do think that there was a dispersal of people, and a lot of the mythologies from even the Far East came from probably the idea from people like Solomon. Because it's interesting almost the way that I kept on thinking, especially when they're like talking about his flying machine being a flying carpet. And then you get the stories about the genies and then, the lamp. And then you have like flying machines. Well, I mean, yeah, in the Testament of Solomon, yeah, that Solomon is talking to demons and he's getting them to do things for him. And he's also, at one point, they were trapping a demon and the demon was offering them all the riches they could desire. So I think that that's where you get the idea from, like
Hmm.
the jinn is demons. And so like I think that's why Solomon is so revered from like all these kind of esoteric Freemasons, secret society type people, is because that's kind of what witchcraft is to them. It's manipulating demons in order to get things from them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the stuff surrounding
Here's
Solomon is very mysterious. And of course, if you really think about like what did Solomon mean when he said there's nothing new under the sun? Oh, you think that's new? What has been will be again. So you could take that concept pretty far. Like, what does he mean? Like that there's nothing new. Could they have flying machines back in the days of Noah? Probably, yeah, probably they did. I mean, if they built all those megaliths, again, it's not so crazy to think that they couldn't get the concept of certain gases and filling up some kind of container to float or to fly.
for sure. I'll put a bow on that real quick because here's the part about the flying machine. They okay, in the Nagast, they called it a heavenly car. And it says the king and all obeyed his word flew on the wagon. So it's more of a structure than a carpet. And then they go on to say that throughout the Middle East, as far as Kashmir, are mountains known as the thrones of Solomon, including one that's in northwestern Iran. It's a flat top mountain called the Throne of Solomon. And there's talk that that's where he landed his Solomon's airship. Just wanted to put a bow on it because there's two different accounts here. One's a carpet, one's a ship, right? So who knows what the truth is, but I'm with you. I think they could have had actual airships back in the Bible times.
Yeah, there's really no telling. I mean, all we know that Solomon was like the wisest person ever. So if you think that somebody's thought of something, he could have certainly been the one to think of it, right? And
Yeah.
it's interesting in a lot of the stuff, the research I've done, I have seen the weird connections with like somebody like Columbus, Columbus making connections between the natives that he found over in the Americas to being part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And when I read through Columbus's journal, he believed that around Panama, where somewhere in like kind of Central or South America is where he was getting his gold and his silver from for his temple.
Oh,
Yeah, because like
yes.
the like Second Kings mentions or First Kings mentions a place called Ophir, I
Oh,
think.
fear.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ophir. Yeah,
I
and
meant to bring that up. That's great, man. Yeah,
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 so
yeah.
but I mean, to me, it's like I said, it's kind of the antithesis of the way we're taught things because why would Columbus think that? Like, why would he have ever thought that? That because he knows where, I mean, at least we believe he knows where Jerusalem is compared to where he sailed from.
Mm.
So he's sailing across the other side of the world, and he's saying that Solomon sailed there to get all the gold for his temple in his palace. And why would he think these people were Hebrews over in America?
Yeah.
We are not told that in school. But yeah, that comes from uh, Columbus had a copy of Second Esdras with him, and there was a place called Azareth where there was a prophecy about the 10 tribes that were taken into captivity by Assyria. That eventually they were going to leave there, and it was like I want to say it was something like a journey that would take like a year and a half, I think, that they were going to go across to this land of Azareth. And so Columbus was making the connections that they had landed in the land of Azareth, and these people that they were counting was the lost 10 tribes of Israel.
It's
Not saying he's
crazy.
right, but it's weird that he thinks that if there's nothing there, if there's no there there.
Yes, exactly. It's like most myths and legends. I think they all go back to something true, or usually they do, right? And it was 400 pounds of gold. Oh no, tons. They said Solomon had 400 tons of gold, something to that effect, that came from this Ophir. And then later, let's see if I have the book here with me. Yeah, there's one of these books I have here. It has a lot of old accounts of things to do with Phoenicians and Minoans. And there's a group in here that are depicted in ancient Egypt, and they were talking about Ophir. They were like Middle Eastern seafaring people. They were called the Kefs, and they think that they may have been Phoenician or Minoan or related to them. That they were Kefs, and they were said to be red skinned, and they would journey to Ophir to get the gold and get the copper and bring it
Hmm.
back to Egypt. And it said it took them 3 weeks journey. So it's like,
Hmm.
were they coming over to North America to get this? And were they, I mean, don't people don't get mad at me for saying this because I didn't come up with the term red man, but people used to refer to Native Americans as being red.
Hmm.
And that's the same thing that history tells us about these calves too. They were red. So is there a Native American connection there? Perhaps. I'm not saying there is, but it's just, you know, and I'm not trying to get, racial or whatever, but
Well, I mean, it's important to ask these questions. Like, why would Columbus have looked at somebody like that and say that they were Hebrew?
that too, the Hebrew thing, like the
So,
tribe of Dan that were
yeah,
said
well,
to be over here.
in that book that I was reading, it is interesting that it was drawing those conclusions because it's asking all kinds of questions like we probably wondered, and now it's not politically correct to ask these questions.
Yeah.
Like, where do all the races come from? So in this book, it was it was saying that a lot of people believe that, so Noah had three sons, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. He was saying in this book, this is what this guy was theorizing. I don't think he was saying it was facts, but he was saying that Japheth was white, Shem was a red person, and Ham was black. And so he was saying like the dispersal of these people. So he's like, so kind of the biblical narrative says that Japheth went through Europe and part of Asia. Shem goes in kind of in the middle area of the world. He goes into the Middle East. He goes into, parts of Northern Africa, and he goes into Asia. And then Ham's line goes down into kind of the same. They kind of, obviously there's overlap for these people, but obviously Ham goes into Africa. So one of Ham's descendants was Cush. The Cushites are the Ethiopians. So I mean that kind of fits a little bit. And it's like the idea that even in the Bible, people like today argue about what color the patriarchs were, what color Jesus was. But it's interesting that it does mention that David had a ruddy face. So ruddy meaning red. So some people say he has red hair, but it says his face is ruddy.
Hmm.
So now it doesn't necessarily mean that every person who was one of the 12 tribes was a red person, but it does seem like certain people believe that. And yeah, it does make sense that JPEG's line was white because what do you see in Northern Europe? You see white people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so anyways,
Anytime.
I guess the point is that Columbus might have believed that, and that's why he was connecting the people that he saw in America. Like, ooh, we found Hebrews here.
Yeah.
Like, why would he think that just based on looking at them?
Well, not too terribly long after Columbus, you have a guy named George Catlin who was over here, and he was a painter and sort of like an explorer guy. He spent a lot of time with Native Americans. This is in the 1800s, and some of his artwork is great. It's worth checking out. But he spent time with a group up in the Dakotas, I believe it was, and the Mandans, I think is what they call themselves. And he got to talking with them about things, and they said that they believed they had an eschatology. They believed that one day they would return to where they came from, and that was to the Middle East, to the region of Jerusalem. And they said, when the day comes, we're going to get on ships, and when we go to Israel, basically, we're going to change our name from the Mandans to the Dans, the tribe,
Interesting.
because we're the tribe of Dan. They believe themselves to be Hebrew originally.
Well, there was also that in the Native Americans they found, I think in Florida and some other regions in America, that they worshiped one God. He was the creator of everything, and they called him Yehovah or Jehovah.
Mm,
Well, that
wow.
sounds a lot like Jehovah or Yahuwah or however like people would
Yeah.
pronounce the name in Hebrew of the Hebrew God, the Most High God. And so I think it's interesting, yeah, because obviously we're told in the ancient dialect they didn't have a J. That I also think that that's a little bit of a it doesn't necessarily mean they didn't pronounce a J. It's just the way that there's a lot of difference between like written language and spoken language. I don't know that everybody understands that. You know, I've tried to notice it. Well, I've noticed a lot more lately as I try to read a bunch of old books. You ever notice how like words are pronounced differently or they're
Mhm.
spelled differently all around the world, and even in English.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like what people pronounce the word as they spelled it the same way.
Oh yeah. So I was looking in an old encyclopedia recently from the 1700s, and I could tell what they were saying, but the letters have morphed. They were using different letters
They were using like
entirely.
F's, like the F's were
Yeah,
S's and things like
yeah,
that.
stuff like that. Yeah,
Well, it's like I said, it is funny because it honestly it kind of makes sense to me now that language is a spoken thing, and then later people write it down. So it's kind of like that, you know, if you live in America, we know that the people in Boston talk different than the people in Louisiana, but all the words are still spelled the same.
hmm
But that's not really, I don't think that's what they did back in the day. They would have spelled the words phonetically how you would
yeah,
pronounce them. So that's why like you read Old English and it's very difficult. Like especially if you think the King James version of the Bible is hard to read, go read like the Geneva Bible. Like and I said I got another book about like the early conquest of South America and it's written in that time period and I'm like I started reading I'm like this is going to be a grind to read this because you start to have to like eventually you do figure out the code like you realize what words you're reading but it's definitely not the way that we read English today. So anyways, the point being all that going back is just that yeah, like how about that the Indians worship a god called Jehovah.
yeah.
I think that that maybe versus what they look like and certain obviously attributes they had that it made Europeans think that there was connection to them and the lost 10 tribes. And I think that one of the things it was saying in this book was when Assyria took Israel into captivity, the 10 tribes, that they started to mix with the Scythians, and then they believed that a lot of times they were also mixing with the Tartars. So then the story goes is that yeah, people cross over on the Bering Strait. Is that how people went from the east to the west? And it sort of makes sense too when you really think about it, like that you could take a people who were civilized and then you disconnect them from civilization and how long before like their language starts to devolve, how long before these people kind of have like a remnant of the culture that they came from but then they really don't, you know what I mean? It's like it's not like we're taking people straight from Jerusalem and taking them and plopping them in America and then keeping them all homogenous together. No, we're talking about thousands of years, people moving across the world, and then them having like just a remnant of the connection to their land. I think that's what the Europeans thought. I think that's why Columbus thought that. Because otherwise it makes no sense that he thought that.
There's so many examples of this. I did a show on this thing it's an ancient wall in Tennessee. It's called the Shatata Wall. It has Hebrew on it.
Hmm.
It's still there. They discovered it in the 1800s. The Smithsonian came in. You know the rest of the story. The farmer, to his credit, reburied the wall because he was starting to feel like something was going to happen to it. So it remains to this day because I think the guy buried it had the foresight to do so. But that it's got Hebrew on it, and it's like, where did that come from? And it'd been there for a long time when they found it in the 1800s. Then you've got these books here. I've got Barry Fell's America BC. He goes through and shows you the Micmac language, a tribe from the American Northeast, if I'm remembering correctly, and their symbols look almost exactly like Egyptian symbols.
Yeah, in that book, it gets a lot into the languages,
Yeah.
and that's again, that's a curious thing you think about. Like, I'm sure a lot of people thought this when they were in grade school, when you're hearing stories about how the Pilgrims were talking to the Indians. Like, how did they know how to speak to them? But it sounds like that a lot of the languages in North America and South America were combinations of languages that were spoken in Asia, Africa, and Europe. So they were able to communicate with them because linguists could figure out what they were saying because they have a common origin of where the language came from. So these people are not totally disconnected. They weren't just
Right.
over there and we're over here. People spread out. So this is why, again, this fits the biblical narrative is like that after the Tower of Babel, people moved. There was there's different languages, but there's a lot of roots. He was saying that there was forgot what they said, how many hundreds of different languages versus the tribes in South and North America. But he said like you could isolate it to 25 or original languages if you actually kind of whittled them down in North America, and it was something like 15 to 20 in South America. And then they're
Wow.
related to, that's why like some people say that the language of the Indians was similar to like an ancient German dialect.
Mhm. Yeah, and I heard you mention Scythians a minute ago, or Scythians.
Hmm.
When I looked into them, and many other people groups, they do seem to go back to Noah's three sons. You could pretty much trace them back. In some cases, you can trace the people groups back to that region too, where the ark was said to have landed. It seems like people really did spread out from that region.
Hmm. Well, you're also talking about after this was when Syria was in charge, and then they got whooped by Babylon. And then so you have a lot of things that take place in the middle of here. And of course, I talk about a lot that I think our history is way distorted from like the times of Christ to today. But you're talking about back then where you have all these empires coming and going. And then what you do see is that what the Tartars' reputation was would be like the Mongols, is these are like a fierce people. Like these are like very cutthroat type people, and like you don't want to mess with them. And so you can imagine like if you have that kind of a tribal dominated area in Asia, like well, who's going to survive in that environment? The toughest ones. And so the most tribalistic ones, maybe the most savage ones, and that's kind of what they describe as like certain tribes of Indians in America, that's what was left. So obviously the weak ones would have been slaughtered, and
Mhm.
they would have adapted to this is what life is like.
They would have
So
integrated too. If they didn't kill them all, they would have
yeah,
integrated. They would have been like swallowed up by a bigger people group, perhaps, or
absolutely.
the bigger tribe. It's interesting. I'm going to do something on this soon, hopefully, and show everybody this information. But I found the capital of Tartaria recently.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. And I did some digging into it. I think I know where Tartaria was. I think I know where its capital was. I think I know a lot of things that are interesting about it. But what is as it pertains to this conversation, it's where I think that the capital of Tartaria is not far from where the Ark landed.
Oh, interesting.
They could it's very close. You could see how they could
Like in
have.
the Caucasus Mountains.
Yeah, it's got access to the Caucasus Mountains for the most part, and there's a sea there, this Caspian Sea.
Hmm.
And if they had boats, let's just say Noah built the ark, and it was an ark, it was a boat, and wouldn't his sons have the knowledge of how to build boats as well?
For sure, for sure. They've seen their dad doing it
if
for like
anybody,
120 years. He's
if
building a boat.
anybody, if anybody can build a boat, right,
Mhm.
it's going to be Noah's sons. So
Yeah.
if it's it
I'm sure
if
they were forced
anything.
to help.
Exactly, right. Right. And that's how people did back in the day. They had kids that as like we need more farm hands. We need more children here. We need more help around here.
Yeah, you're not
I
building a boat like that by yourself.
No, 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 no. So I think what it is they had access Tartaria had access to the Caucasus Mountains via the lake there. So actually a sea, it's a giant sea. So I think the people groups could have spread out from there. And I'm still working on all this. This is just theory, but
Yeah, I think that the interesting part about it is like even like the idea of the Tartars or Tartaria or Grand Tartary is that I think the way that a lot of people interpret it today, especially like when you look into like lost civilization type stuff or like the grand architecture. So they would say Tartarians did this, Tartarians did X, Y, or Z. But I think that the name Tartars comes from Europeans, their name for these people. And I don't necessarily attribute like these savage tribes to the ones who built those buildings. I think the buildings were there. I think that there was a more civilized people who built those buildings. Now, what the Europeans refer to the Tartars, I really do think that they were talking about the Mongols, those type of people, like tribal people. And I think that now we look back and it's like it kind of makes sense why they would label an area Tartaria that they don't really know much about. And I think there is a connection in these Europeans' Christian mind of Tartarus
Oh yeah.
That's what they're viewing this place as unknown. It's deadly. It's scary. Don't go there. We don't know what happens over there. It's a dangerous place.
Like
It's like
Tartarus
going,
from scripture, like where
yeah,
it's
it's like hell.
hell, like yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're describing this place as like a hellish place. You see these old maps where they show the Great Wall of China, which I don't believe the Chinese built, but they show like monsters and stuff and dragons and stuff all around this area. Where like whether that was true or not, I think the Europeans believed that that's the stuff that was happening over there. It was like, don't even go over there. Don't mess with that place. That place is dangerous. We're going to stay over here. We know it's safe. Even I did a show with Doc Brown and we were talking about Prester John. And like during the time of the Byzantine Empire, they had all these mythologies about this king of kings who was a Christian and he had a kingdom and he had all this crazy stuff that was happening over there where he had like a land with like living waters and no sinful things could enter this place and really weird stuff. It sounds almost like a millennial kingdom type situation. But with that being said, I'm not saying any of that's true, but it's weird to me that we're told that Alexander the Great, within 12 years, he pushed his empire all the way into India. And so then you think about the Roman Empire is a greater empire than that. So then obviously they're expanding their trade into the same place as the Greeks were. And then by the time we're talking about like 500-600 years from then, these Europeans don't know much about what's happening in China and India. They have legends about things that are happening there. Like at present time, when
Hmm.
you would think they could just send their emissaries, they could send messengers, they could send all kinds of people to go figure out what's actually happening there. But for some reason, there's some kind of a separation in their understanding. Even if you think about it, like the historical church teaches us that Thomas, the apostle, went into India and he was spreading the gospel there. So this is in the first century. So in the first century, there's Christians in that part of Asia. But then by the time you get like 1,000 years later, we're told they don't know what's happening in Asia. So then they write it on their maps as like this is Tartaria, this is Tartarus, this is like the land of hell and death and monsters. So the buildings, the architecture there, yes, I do believe that that came from a different civilization, that came from a different type of people. But it's kind of similar now where one of my good friends who does ancient archaeology, he talks about the Olmecs in in South America. There's really very bizarre looking heads and statues that look they kind of almost look a little bit Asian. They might look almost a
Hmm.
little bit African. It's really hard to say what kind of complexion these
They're
people have.
they are distinct looking people.
Very distinct.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting about it is, so we call them the Olmecs. What was their actual name? Well,
Right. Yes.
nobody really knows
I see
because
what you're saying.
they're named after a place, right? But the
Hmm.
people there didn't. We don't know what it is because again, this is a lost civilization, so nobody really knows like who they were.
Hmm.
So us calling them the Olmecs today really does not give us anything other than just like a something to hang this weird phenomenon on it of these people, right? I think it's the same way that you could call these people Tartars or Tartarians now, but was what did they call themselves? I don't think we know.
Yeah. I love this side profile of one of these old mechs.
I was
Lot
joking
of
with my friend because he posted something about all these different heads that they found. And I said, you know, it kind of reminds me of, did you ever watch that movie Bloodsport?
I don't know if I saw that one actually.
What about Enter the Dragon? You ever seen Enter the Dragon with
I
Bruce
think so.
Lee?
Yeah. 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 Oh yeah.
Well,
Hmm.
there's the one real famous kind of bodybuilder karate guy from I think he's Japanese. I'm not sure. His name's Bolo. He was like the villain in these things, but he's kind of got these big lips and he's kind of got this flat nose. And I said he kind of looks just like these people.
Hmm.
He looks just like those statues. You look at Bolo Young.
This one's interesting. When it's got skin color to it.
That looks like somebody graffitied that thing.
Yeah, it does. It does. Unfortunately. Yeah. These. Yeah. I get what you're saying though about what did they call themselves?
Right. So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. So like now you're kind of identifying a people with the whole region. But if you look at on these maps, how big is Grand Tartary? It's huge. It takes up a giant portion of northern Asia and down all the way down to China. So who were these people? It's like we're talking about like lots of different peoples probably lived there. That's why when you get into like the legends of Genghis Khan, people in their mind, they're already picturing an Asian looking guy. Like, with not trying to be racist, but you're thinking like you're picturing like yellowish skin, you're picturing like kind of slanty eyes, right? And like kind of a funny
Mhm.
mustache.
I think about an Asian looking person or a Mongolian looking figure.
Well, but what Genghis Khan is described as is having red hair. Most people don't talk about that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so if he had red hair, he probably didn't look like you're picturing him to look, because we all know what redheaded people look like. So what does that
See,
what does that tell you? It's like even the name Genghis Khan, it's like that's not even a name. Like Genghis Khan is a title. It's like saying great king.
yeah, yeah. You know what? So I've got an old account. I won't dig it up right now, but it's an account of these guys who found some giants, and I think it was Utah. And
Hmm.
they found a burial cave with a woman and a man in there, and they said they were both giants, and they were both buried in their armor. And they said that the man, because it's a dry climate out there, plus it's in a cave,
Hmm.
it's a preserving atmosphere. They said the body was really preserved. You could see the guy's hair, and he had red hair, and they said he looked like he was Mongolian, giant Mongolian redhead.
Oh, interesting. So maybe he could look kind of Asian and he could have red hair.
And I see what you're saying too. I'm just saying, like, who knows? These people were mixing groups, they were conquering each other too, and like I said, like swallowing up the
Oh yeah, I
people they
want to say
conquered.
is don't even like mainstream people say that like 10% of Asia is related to Genghis Khan?
Yeah, that's what I hear. Maybe even more than 10%, but yeah, I've heard
It
that
it's sort of funny. It's almost even fits kind of like the idea of Solomon. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
from
So how many
different
how many little
regions.
Solomons were running around?
Yeah,
So how many people are related to King Solomon?
yeah, yeah.
You would think a lot based on
Yeah,
those numbers.
I think so too. And I think the people probably had pride in their people group, just like we do today. There, you see people to this day carrying on or carrying out traditions where they wear their traditional sort of ethnic garb and do what the people who came before them, what their ancestors did. So there's an element of that too, where I think a lot of these groups were probably trying to preserve who they were, but you can't
You
stop the
could,
conquering.
yeah, I guess that's the thing. It's like you could try, but I guess that's the thing. It's like if we know anything about history, it was about people dominating other peoples and other people migrating based on war and famine and all kinds of things. So then what ends up happening is you have a mixing of peoples. So that's the
Hmm.
interesting thing, even biblically. If you kind of a little apologetic stuff, if people don't know this, that Babylon took the Israelites, they took Judea, they took the Levites in the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin into captivity, and they mostly kept them together. Now, what the Assyrian empires typically did was they spread people out. They didn't let them stay together. It kind of makes sense strategically if you take this enemy into like you don't want to have a repeat of what happened in Egypt, is that you have all these people growing together, and then Egypt's got a problem because the Hebrews became like a very powerful nation, and then they're like, what are we going to do with them? So that's like where you get the story of like how the Pharaoh wanted to kill like the firstborn. He wanted to kill the male children because they realized it was a problem. They were going to be hard to contain. So Assyria kind of spread the people out. And so even in the story of like Babylon, even though they were kept together, when they come back in the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, everybody's lamenting the fact that these people started to already mix in with the people from Babylon, and they were taking wives of people that they shouldn't have been. So then if you think about like people going across to Asia, as big as it is, people are going to start, yeah, they're mixing with the Scythians, they're mixing with the people they're called the Tartars. And like so where does these people's identity, national identity, come from now? Well, I mean, some people probably held tight to it, but some people probably didn't. And then, like, so where does one end and one begin? I mean, even if you think about like the way that just in modern times, when the Europeans basically drew the borders for these countries in the Middle East, and that's why there's so much problems there, is because these people didn't consider themselves nations. These people were like, they're based on their religions and their tribes. And so just because we identify as, okay, well, we have a border with Mexico, we have a border with Canada, We're a country. We even have state borders, but we're mostly the same kind of people, and we obey the laws of the land. Well, these people are only forced to be put together, even though they really don't want to be put together.
Hmm.
And I think it was probably more like that back in those days. Even you think about in the times of the conquest in the land of Canaan, is that they didn't remove all the people from Canaan. It's like this one of the kind of the judgments on the people is that they did not push out all the people, and these people were going to be thorns in the sides of the Israelites. Jerusalem was they didn't push out all the original people from Jerusalem, so they were called the Jebusites. So the Jebusites were always in Jerusalem at the same time. And so once you get past 70 AD, all the genealogies and the temple records were kept in the temple that the Romans razed to the ground, destroyed 100% of it. So now who's related to who? Like who was a
Yeah.
Jebusite versus who was quote unquote a Jewish person?
Yeah.
Well,
I came
nobody
in.
nobody knows. Like nobody like how could anyone even prove who they were, who they were related to at this point?
Yeah, there was a count. I want to say it was Herodotus, but it was one of the old historians, and he was telling a story about this group that Rome could not conquer, and they were a tribe that was in the region we call Germany today. They were called the Germania,
Hmm.
and they were big, robust, probably giants, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, and the Romans tried to conquer them 3 times and could not because they were so great in battle. But they said they studied them. They gave up, I think, on trying to conquer them and started to study them. Like, who are these people? We can't conquer. This doesn't happen every day. And they said they were this insulated group that they married and procreated from within. They had a a a thing that they like to do, which did not include going out and mixing with other people groups. I thought that that was interesting, but what you see in the but if Rome had conquered them, what would have happened to them, right? They would have been probably dispersed. They wouldn't have been able to keep this
Hmm.
lineage going, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Rome assimilated people. I think that's the way that
Yes,
I mean, I think that again,
that's
these are the Romans were very civilized. I mean, they're pretty barbaric in certain ways, but they were pretty civilized, and I think they had an understanding of how to really conquer people. Well, you promise powerful people in those places parts seats at the table,
true.
right? You make them a Roman citizen. You make them like a prefect in here, like so now you're a Roman, and obviously all the things that Rome can give you if you
It's
do
true.
take part. So yeah, I
They would
mean,
integrate. That you're right. The Romans definitely would integrate with people, or have people stay where they're at and be like, okay, you answer to us now, but you can carry on.
right. Well, I mean, if you think about it, like it really is kind of hard to wrap our minds around the fact that if what you picture of the ancient world and the Romans conquering even the territory they say they did, I honestly believe that they conquered way more than that. But if you just look at the landmass that they conquered, and this is back before telephones, this is back for like, you know, F F-18 Raptors, and how do you control these people? You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Like, how can a small group of what we kind of picture as like Italian people, like, how do they keep everybody in line? Because it takes a long time to move an army to go mess with them if they are starting to act up. When you're talking about they conquered all the way into Great Britain, the island of Great Britain. So, like, how do you stop people from revolting? And how can you have a presence everywhere to keep people under control? I think it's pretty complicated. I honestly think it's super complicated that they could do that. And I do think that they had technology. I don't know what they
mm,
had, but I do think that there's a lot more to that story about how you could do that because, get into biblical times. I mean, I really do think that that's what the book of Revelation is talking about when it says that who can who can make war against the beast? Who can fight against the beast? I mean, if Rome conquered all that territory, like how would you ever fight against them? Because they
that's
set up their cities, their governors, and their prefects in all these places. I mean, it's like cities like London, Londinium, it was a Roman
Londinium.
city.
Yeah,
Paris was a Roman city. You think about like the Holy Roman Empire that's in Germany, like all those cities were built by the Romans. So like what we kind of know about them, they built the greatest cities the world's ever seen. So how did they
I
do
mean,
that in such a
I,
primitive time?
I certainly think that they had channels, open channels to fallen beings, to other entities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why they worship those
Yeah,
gods.
that seems to be. When I look back on the Romans and the Greeks and those groups, it's like And even like you got the Etruscans there, that it's been thought or said that maybe the Romans came out of the Etruscans because there was Etruscans living in Rome before it was Rome. They were still teaching Etruscan in the schools there. If you go back and look at the old history books and the historians, so maybe the Romans emerged from this group, the Etruscans. But either way, the Etruscans were very, very shamanistic. They were very serious about sorcery, like down to their daily routine is what was documented in some of their manuscripts. They just integrated their magic into just about everything they did on a daily basis. And that's what I think about when I think about those groups is their connection to these little g gods essentially.
You know, it's interesting. I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier about you were saying that wherever the ground was for the Romans is now 30 feet higher.
Yeah.
You know, so like ancient Rome is 30 feet under the ground of like what we see. And it's interesting. I always send my buddies who like kind of like follow like the little season stuff. I always send them these articles almost. I used to send them like daily or weekly that they accidentally find Roman cities and buildings and bathhouses and Roman mosaics under the ground accidentally still today all the time. I think that's really weird. I think it's a weird anomaly that we're not told about. I don't think that there's a great explanation for it. It's mostly just dismissed. It's more just like, oh well, sediment builds up over time. What are they not sweeping the streets? Like, how does your whole city get buried under the ground? Like that Rome got abandoned for I forgot how many hundreds of years they said like the city of Rome got abandoned. Like to me that makes no sense. Okay, so this is how again, just because I think it makes no sense doesn't mean it's not true. But just go with me for 1 second. Okay, so you have these barbarians, these Germanic tribes, you have these Gauls from France, and they come in, the barbarians at the gates of Rome. They finally sack Rome. Why don't they stay there? Like, why don't they set up their kingdom there? I mean, you imagine like if you took over Rome, you just took down the top dog in the world, right? And they've got the best temples, they got the best palaces, they got the best everything there. Like, why would anyone just let that sit? Because what do we know about empires today or kingdoms today? Wouldn't you kind of set yourself up there? Wouldn't you go sit in Caesar's house when you take his throne over?
Mm-hmm.
But that we're not told that they did that. So this is where I get into my theory about where all this sediment comes from. I think it's really, really interesting and somewhat suspicious that the very first documented volcanic eruption ever was Mount Vesuvius. Did you know that?
No, tell me.
Yeah, so Mount Vesuvius, so the destruction of Pompeii and Herculaneum, I think it's how you pronounce it, or Herculaneum.
They say that was the first volcano ever to explode.
No, they don't say that's the first one, but that's the first one that's ever been documented
Oh,
in
I see.
history.
I got you. Okay, I'm with you.
So I think that's like I don't know, I think it's a big deal. I don't think you can really overstate that that's a big deal to me is that the way that we've kind of been taught in school, kind of a lot of the false things we're taught about outer space, we're taught about dinosaurs. So as kids, we're seeing depictions of these monstrous lizards running around with volcanoes erupting all around the place. So you're thinking, in our eyes, it's like this is a phenomenon that's happened millions and millions of years ago. This has happened since the very beginning. Well, nobody ever wrote about it until the first century AD. And I think it's really, really suspicious that what we're told is so in 70 AD, the Romans destroy Jerusalem, burn it to the ground, destroy every stone off the temple, wreck all their buildings, just bury the place. The same decade that Mount Vesuvius erupts, like right afterwards, 79 AD, we're told that that's when Mount Vesuvius erupted. And when you actually listen to the stories about what happened to Pompeii and Herculaneum, you find out that they say that the reason a lot of these old buildings don't have roofs is because when this volcano erupted, it shot up pumice, ash, and sediment into the atmosphere. It all comes down. And it says like, yeah, Herculaneum was buried like 70 feet on with sediment and ash and pumice covered the place. So I started to think about that. And so they acknowledged that there's a volcanic ring around that area. I think that that's why I think that's what really happened to Rome. I think that there was a cataclysm that happened in what we're told is probably around the sixth century. If you ever looked into like 536 AD, this was like written about again, very short fragments of history, but it mentions by these historians, like one of them is like John of Ephesus, wrote about that at noonday the sun did not give its light for 18 months. Like you wouldn't cast a shadow at noon. And it said, yeah, the sun went dark for 18 months. It was followed by a mini ice age, the Justinian plague. There was wars and famines all around the same time. And so this is a worldwide
Is
phenomenon.
this supposedly in 536 AD?
This is what they say. And so
Yeah.
if you do any research about that, this is what the mainstream researchers today attribute that to volcanic activity, either one super volcano or a multitude of volcanoes. So I just thought about it. I was like, what if this is where our histories really started to get broken right
Mm,
here? Now, so it's like, it's my conclusion that there's a lot of junk years in that first 1,000 years. So I'm suggesting, what if 536 was the first century? What if this is when we had Mount Vesuvius erupt, but you had volcanoes erupting all over the place?
hmm
And that's where all the sediment, this is what we kind of attribute a lot to the mud flood.
hmm
That I'm not saying that there hasn't been other kinds of cataclysmic events that could lead to more sediment moving around and burying certain buildings, but I think that this might have been the big one. This is the big one. This is how Rome got buried. Because
That's
otherwise, like I said,
interesting.
it makes no sense that you have the greatest empire the world's ever known got buried and nobody thought to dig it out until like literally like a couple hundred years ago, like 150 years ago.
Yeah, I think if there's some timeline, if there's something wonky with the timeline, my opinion would be it would be that first, it would be from 1 AD to 1100 AD,
Hmm.
somewhere in there. Because I think anytime I've looked into this, everything from 1100 AD till now seems like it could be relatively straightforward and not off. That's just from my research.
Hmm.
Because I'm basing that on bloodlines. Because anytime I've traced bloodlines, and I did, uh, I had a friend of mine gave me their information. They're related to all these huge royal
Yeah,
people from
everybody's always
history.
related to royalty when they trace their bloodlines back.
Yeah, but this one's like this one's like a straightforward line. Like
Hmm.
I know what you're saying too, but yeah, this one was. So I looked into it and I looked at this person's family members, and I could trace them all the way back to 1100 AD, and it's a straight line. It runs through the woman. It was a matriarchy lineage, matriarchal lineage, and there's there was. I just don't see that these people would mess with history or mess with the timeline because of their bloodline, because they count on that bloodline as their legitimacy.
Hmm.
That's just my thing. But
No,
but
and
but but
I'm not.
before 1100, I don't know where that thing went. It's like, oh, why is it disappearing now?
Well, that's
Why
what I'm
isn't it going
saying.
any
I think
further?
that's where I think that this is where the major break in our history is. Because yeah, like that based on I don't know if you've ever seen it in the stuff we talked about with like Gunnar Heinzen's research.
Hmm
So Gunnar Heinzen is his theory that was 700 years were added to the first 1,000 years. So he's saying like things that were supposedly happening in early antiquity, mid antiquity, and late antiquity, they were all taking place at the same time. So like the destruction of Rome was not done just based on barbarians. It was probably this cataclysm that made sense. Because honestly, the funny part about it is like when you see what Rome looked like when they found it, and after it was not after they excavated it, what kind of weapons did the barbarians have? Because I know what everybody's picturing. They're picturing like bows and arrows and clubs and stuff like that. Barbarians. Well, how do they have the ability to destroy the city? Were they throwing big rocks or something like that? What were they doing?
Yeah,
So to me, it looks more like an act of God destroyed that place.
sure.
Because again, who can make war against the beast? Who can fight against the beast? You're gonna go all the way into Italy and you're gonna get to Rome and you're gonna take the city down, and then you're just gonna leave it there for hundreds of years. So yeah,
Mm,
it's my conclusion that yeah, that makes sense to me that that's why when Gunnar Heinzen says that this is all based on the stratigraphy, So the strata line shows that the buildings that were supposedly built in late antiquity, mid antiquity, and early antiquity were all built at the exact same strata line, which would be an anomaly because what you'd expect to find is these levels of architecture and civilization were built on top of each other, but they're the same buildings, same construction methods, same materials are
Hmm.
all built at the exact same strata level, even when they're separated by up to 700 years. So he also said that this was based on his examination of 30,000 Roman sites. And what he said is, what did they find under those Roman sites? Nothing. So it was like this is where like the base level was, and
Oh,
nothing was under there. And so it makes sense because he did other research. He said that what he could see based on like the sediment layers and these sedimentary fills, he said there was a great one, and he called it, this is probably attributed to the deluge. And then there was another one after that. I guess they were saying there was three or four, but he was saying that they were all one. And so
mm,
this is what he was saying, like this is what happened. And he was showing like these depictions, I think from like the 1500s, maybe earlier than that. He was showing them farming in the middle of Rome and in places like London, where all this stuff, like literally in the middle of the city, that there was that much sediment taking place, and people were, yeah, we're farming there.
yeah, yeah. There was a temple of Minerva found in the middle of London too. When they were doing some, this is in recent time. They were building an office building or something. Anytime they disrupt anything in any of these cities, they find these layers. They just found one in Notre Dame, in Paris, right underneath Notre Dame. They had to shut everything down for excavation because they're finding bowls or coins with Constantine on them and stuff down there on this buried layer. So it's the same for London. They were doing this office building and they had to stop building it because they found an old temple to Minerva that they think predates the city itself.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, so even today, of course, I know that if you kind of look into like kind of secret societies and conspiracies, it is kind of funny that the city of London is actually not what people picture as London. The city of London is that ancient city that the Romans refer to as Londinium. And so it's actually a separate city compared to like London proper. And so even today, I want to say that the royal family, like King
Mm,
Charles has to get permission to enter into the city of London because the city of London is not under their command. It's got its own sovereign laws. It's kind of similar to DC, Washington DC, and also the Vatican, where they're like these
yep.
own kind of their own separate entities. And I think that that's when you get into like the idea that, some people say Rome never fell. I believe that it did fall, but I think that the spirit has kind of tried to remain. And maybe like this is the idea of like the modern return of the Roman Empire, is that you have like the religious wing over in the Vatican, you have the financial one in London or Londinium, and then you have like the war industrial complex you have in DC. And I think that actually makes sense, that you can't really, these
And
people,
CERN,
yeah, well, yeah, they have, yeah, private their
they have
science.
that. They have that too. They have that same DC sort of legality where they created themselves as a nation state for lack of a better term, but they also built that on top of an old temple as well.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I
It's a
want to say that,
spirit, like you're
yeah,
saying.
the temple to Apollyon, the temple to
Yeah,
Apollo
yeah,
is right on,
exactly.
yeah, where the Hydra Collider is.
So yeah, so you're saying like that spirit of the place has carried through all these years.
Well, I think that that's probably where like a lot of the origin, a lot of the secret societies come from. I know these mystery schools are even older than that, but I think that that sort of makes sense, that if you do have a kind of an overall Christian Western world, that they would need to be secret, because you can't worship Apollo, you can't worship the old gods anymore. I mean, literally, the Roman emperors made them illegal. They outlawed paganism under like Theodosius the First.
Hmm.
So you weren't allowed to worship the old gods. And you know what's interesting? I want to say that there's these legends that happened in the first century where they were talking about how the oracles could not get their prophecies from Pan anymore, or from Apollo anymore. Do you ever hear that?
No.
Like there was a famous, I forgot who wrote this, but I want to say that there was a famous phrase that Pan is dead because his
Okay.
prophets had went silent. And so this
Yeah.
happened in the first
Yeah.
century as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I think that those type of sites are over here too in North America. And we just don't know about them, obviously, because they obfuscated this. They kept it out of our history. But there's through the secret societies, like you're saying, I think there's a link and there's a knowledge. I think some of the secret societies to this day still have knowledge of the ancient sites that the
Hmm.
rest of the public doesn't know about. And I think that that was the case here in America too. And I think that's why you see, I wanted to get into this with you today. So we'll see if I can make this work. But the Hoover Dam, like
Oh yeah, yeah.
what if that was one of these older sites there that the secret societies knew about? So whenever they come in to put their stuff on top of it, they have to do this big ritual. I think they've, if not the Hoover Dam, I do think they've done that with other sites over here because I think all of our cities are sitting on top of older sites and cities here. So I
Yeah.
wonder if the same would be true for the Hoover Dam too, because there was some heavy Masonic activity going on with the construction of that place.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that the interesting thing is when you start to look into the mythologies and even the way that these ancient empires were kind of connected, they kind of had like a loose connection where I always bring up the fact that so we're told about the story of Atlantis from we get it from Plato. But Plato is repeating a story that he's been told. So yeah, I
From
think he got it
Solon.
from like Herodotus, and I think Herodotus got it from Solon. Solon
Yeah.
went to Egypt. He got the story from these ancient Egyptians, and he's saying like your culture is new, like our culture is very old. And he's telling them they're kind of schooling them like here's the real
Yeah.
deal. And
There's no
so
story among you that is white with age, Solon.
yeah.
You Greeks are younglings.
Well, it is funny that when the Greeks get into the story about Atlantis, they also have like a ancient Athens and ancient Greece that was at the same time. It was like they were contemporaries of like this society. I think that's probably more likely true because I don't think that obviously the Egyptians that came out in Solon's time are not antediluvian, so they don't. They're passing on their history just like everybody else did in the world. But the main point of all that is that to say that so when Plato tells the story, guess who founds Atlantis? It was Poseidon. So who did the Egyptians tell him it was Poseidon? I think my understanding would be is that whatever god they suggested it was, the Greeks knew him as Poseidon. And that's why like even in the story of like Alexander the Great at one point wanted to conquer the Tyrians, the people of Tyre, and he wanted to go worship in a temple to Melkart. So the Tyrians had this crazy city on this island out there, and they had this massive temple to Melkart. So like the real question, like for most people, like why would Alexander the Great want to worship in this temple to this god that he doesn't worship? Well, Alexander the Great knew him as Hercules. So it's like even here, even in America, even in Asia, Africa, wherever, all around the whole realm, these secret societies have the understanding that whatever sun god people are referring to, they know it as the sun god they picture. It could be
Mhm.
Helios, it could be Shamash, it could be
Ra.
Apollo. Yeah, it could be Ra. It doesn't really matter because this is your name for him. It's the same way like that if today, like, we go to a place in Asia or in Mexico and they call Jesus by a different name. Like we're identifying with the same person, the same
Mhm.
God. So it's like that's the kind of understanding they have. So then you get into over in America, and I think that when you think about the idea of like them communicating with these ancient peoples that were there, they made them finding ancient sites, and they're making the same connections with these are the old gods that these people worship. And yes, are these places set up on based on ley lines? Were these significant places? What happened to America? It's been devastated by something. Was there stuff that was under some of these places, some of these cities that might relate back to
Oh,
antiquity?
there was ley line activity too. I've seen that for sure. Just to add in, like I think a lot of the construction that our modern cities are on right now line up with these ley lines. Like one of the things I found was Pike. Albert Pike was talking about it. He was talking about the Templars who were over here before Columbus, who were
Hmm.
mapping out ley lines. He said Brigham Young got a hold of that information because he was a Mason, and so Brigham Young, being a Mason, knowing about the ley lines, put some of the early Mormon temples on this line. And then you get into Francis Bacon, who was funding that Virginia colony stuff. He had Sir Walter Raleigh over here, who was mapping out what they called the 77th meridian because they wanted to put towns on that. And then if you go into DC, there's actually a little known site. It's like a little plaque on a rock or something, and it commemorates the meridian that Thomas Jefferson knew about. That I think goes back to what Walter Raleigh was doing with the 77th meridian work. So all that to say, they were using the ley lines over here. It makes me wonder about these sites like Hoover Dam or whatever, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's interesting you get into the Mormon stuff. I know me and my wife have been kind of doing a deep dive on some of these with these FLDS people, the kind of the fundamentalists. And I was kind of looking, I was watching these shows about some of these Mormons. Famously Joseph Smith was a Freemason. Like a lot of all these guys were Freemasons. That's why they have like whatever their rites are they do in their temples are very almost identical to some of the Freemason stuff. So when you think about their temples, and these people were very obsessed with, if you think about it, like even today, I want to say that a lot of people in the church are obsessed with like these relics from these time before. Even the story about Joseph Smith finding these golden tablets and things like that. I mean, I don't believe any of that, but it's interesting. But it's like that's kind of the origin of their religion is sort of about like this hidden, mysterious knowledge that they found, and then this caused them to do X, Y, and Z. Now, what they're actually saying versus what they actually believe, and what the people that, again, you have like the levels in this church, like what they actually know about our history. It's like I said, it's probably a lot of the same thing.
Yeah.
But
And
to get
Smith was
specific,
he was a Mason too. I think
oh
a
yeah, that's
lot
what I'm
of
saying.
that.
Yeah, Joseph Smith was a Mason. All these people
Yeah.
were.
Well,
Like a lot
it's
of
a
the early
lot
church
like
was.
exactly. It's not unlike what's his name who started science L. Ron Hubbard
Right, right.
being an occultist working with Crowley magic. He was a big time magician, and I think you see that in the creation of these religions that these guys create. It comes back to their mystery school beliefs.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you want to go specifically to the Hoover Dam, I know you probably wanted to talk about that because I released a video. I just posted it again.
It's
It's like
cool.
a video I posted on TikTok years ago. And this was early on when I was starting to make content. I was really fascinated with like the mystery school stuff, the symbolism and everything. So I was looking at a lot of these old buildings, these Art Deco. What we're told now is Art Deco. Art Deco is just a name for something that probably they want to identify as something like, oh, it was totally normal back in the day for them to put these angels and gods and weird stuff, all these esoteric symbols on everything. But I mean, looking back, I think a lot of those buildings might actually be older. But when I was doing this little series on that, eventually people were like, okay, do this building next. And then eventually
Hmm.
somebody said, do the Hoover Dam. And that's when I got into like the memorial area for with those crazy winged guardians, as they're called, but they're
Yes,
giant
yes.
angels.
Well, the link is the Freemasons. It just dawned on me. We're talking about the mystery school, starting the religions.
Hmm.
And there's that link with this Hoover Dam too, because FDR was a Freemason. He did the speech there, and then I
Hmm.
think the guy who designed the whole thing was a Mason too, Oscar Hansen.
Yeah, Oscar J. Hansen was the guy who I forgot what other sculptures he did, but yeah, he's the one who's credited with the creation of those angels that are sitting on
Yeah,
weird black cubes over at the Hoover Dam, and they've got a star map in front of it, and
yeah.
it's really really weird. I mean, it's the funny part about it is that when I was doing that series, like I really didn't know much about it other than those angels are bizarre. Like it's a weird thing to have at a dam. The funny part about it is like every time I post that video or when I posted it from the very beginning, people are like, "When did they put those there?" I was just there. They weren't there, and I said, "No, they've been there from the 30s."
Since the 30s, yeah,
Yeah, from the 30s,
definitely.
those things were there, because actually the star map that's around those angels actually denotes the exact time that the dam was dedicated. And like I want to say it was like December something 1936, or maybe it was September. It's like September 19th, 1936 is
Hmm.
when the dam was dedicated. Yeah, and they have like they're called the Winged Guardians. But they're very
This
clearly angels. I mean, they're absolutely
Oh yeah,
angels.
those are angels for sure. This looks like a Masonic symbol here.
Yeah, the
That's
way that the light goes and the eagle's wings. So yeah, that's kind of what I made the connection in the video. I said it looks like a compass and square.
so I
At least
looked
a crude
into this
version of it,
guy.
yeah.
It does. I looked into this guy a little bit, and it turns out he wrote a book called Beyond the Cherubim.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, so he's into in there he's referencing the Nephilim and stuff. He talks about all this stuff. He directly references the Nephilim and Egyptian gods. And he's got a story in that book too, where he talks about a Viking island that he found when he was young, and they found an 8 foot skeletons in a mound because he grew up in like Norway or Sweden up there,
Okay, yeah.
and he had a Sami with him. His friend was a Sami, which they're known to be shamans. They're very shamanistic people. When you get into the work of John Keel, he thinks that he theorizes that the men in black that showed up in 1947 and afterwards were Sami people. That our government was using the Samis from this region because they were like in tune with shamanism or something, and with the other side. But anyway, he talks about cherubim, Nephilim, giant bones, and a couple other things. So I was like, man, this guy's kind of tuned into the spiritual realm.
For sure.
And he grew up, like I said, up in Norway, where he was said to be. There's a theory that he was secretly the son of King Oscar of Norway. So there might be like a bloodline thing involved. And they said he was connected to 9 different presidents. And he was, at some point in his life, he was looking for the Grail. They said he had some ideas on aliens and extraterrestrials and all that. But anyway, I looked into him, and I just thought it was interesting that he had said he found giant bones and had this crazy life. I just
Yeah, so
it,
here's another one of his statues still in
there you
the
go.
in Minneapolis in the Rand Tower. Kind of makes you think of like Silver Surfer a little bit.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
there's
for
that
sure.
crazy plaque that's there. Yeah, we'll get into that. So yeah, when I originally started to look into it, I just thought it was weird, but then I started to really like if you watch the video, I kind of made it, I made it kind of funny. Like I'm just
That's
like
good.
goofing off like but I mean that's how you make videos. Like I trying to spoon feed people and make them kind of laugh and trying to use the bro humor, but it almost was like the way that I made that video was almost exactly how I did it. I was just like, there's a lot of weird stuff here. Maybe I should start to like see if I can make some of these pieces fit together. Like, what does this mean? So yeah, like you have a star map that denotes exactly when this was built, and supposedly it goes back to obviously these celestial alignments that, like, when you have these certain alignments, like people would know exactly. I mean, literally, if you read Genesis 1:14, God says that the sky's a clock. So that's exactly what they're showing on the star map is like when this dam was dedicated. And it's like, but it's also kind of a weird thing. Like, why do you got to put like a star map on a dam? Like I want to say Oscar J. Hansen famously said that he was comparing the Hoover Dam to the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And like you could maybe on one base level, you could say, well, he's talking about a very heavy stone structure versus like the most concrete they've ever used to build anything.
Or
But at the
Egyptian
same time,
cosmology.
or is it reference to that the Great Pyramid was a power station and this is
That
a
too.
hydroelectric dam? I mean, maybe it's both. So, but like I guess like if to cut to the chase to get to the end of the video that I was saying, this is weird. So you have these angels here. They're sitting on black cubes. There's clearly some kind of connection to black cubes in Saturn. And so, what if Saturn is kind of synonymous with rituals? I
Mhm.
want to say that they had some really weird iconography there with like I think Native American type iconography around the dam, like inside the dam on these terrazzo floors. But the thing that really got me was when you go back to this image over here. So this is behind those angels, and it says they died to make the desert bloom. And I was like, what the heck is that supposed to mean if it doesn't sound like exactly what you think it means? Because what we're told historically, around 100 people died building the Hoover Dam. I believe some people say that they're actually encased in the concrete in some cases.
Oh my goodness.
And so this sounds to me like this is a sacrifice. And so if you think about that connection with Saturn, look, you see grain above his hands, right?
Yeah.
Grain. Saturn was like a god of agriculture. So was Baal in ancient Mesopotamia. You got lightning here. So you kind of like that storm god motif. And this guy's standing up over here. I thought, you know what? That sounds like to me, it sounds like that you don't talk about people dying in a construction project like that. Like I said, I have a background in construction. My family owned a construction company. We've had men lose their lives when we were building something. No one would ever say that about them. Like this building could not have been built if it wasn't for this person's dying. That's a tragedy. That's separate. You would never say that because obviously you hope to build lots of things without anyone getting hurt ever.
Mhm.
So the way it's phrased, it does seem like was this some kind of mass sacrifice type thing that took place here? Is this a? It almost looks like a little bit of an altar up there, and of course, lots of people, like myself included, I started to wonder like, this is like some Illuminati type stuff. This is like that's exactly what it is. And I don't know if you know this, but did you ever see that movie Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness?
Yes.
Do you know that one scene where they go to the Illuminati? They go into this other multiverse and they go to the headquarters of the Illuminati. And so I think what it's like there is a who is it? Mr. Fantastic, there is Professor X, there's like some kind of alternate version of like Captain Marvel, and I think who cares? Doesn't matter. Anyways, the point being is that at one point they have to have a fight with Scarlet Witch. And when they have to fight with him, so they're in the Illuminati headquarters in this. And I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. There's almost the exact same angels are in the background of that
Mm.
shot where they're fighting. So I'm like, I'm connecting this with the Illuminati already. And then I actually see like in a Disney movie today, like in a modern day times, they're in there. I want to say also in the Flash movie, those angels make an appearance. When there's like a hospital collapsing, like
Okay.
there's like an earthquake or something happening, maybe a bomb blows up, and you can see those angels are there. And it almost feels like these angels have some kind of connection to sacrifices.
Yeah, well, let me ask people something. If they said, well, it changes, right? The thing you just showed said 112 people, and I also heard 99 people died. So somewhere around 100 people died. At what point, though, do you start leaving a job site? You'd think when like the 48th guy died, people would quit or wise up, be like, this is not safe to work on this dam. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but it seems to me like platoons in Vietnam had better odds than the Hoover Dam team.
Right? Yeah. Are you serious? It's crazy. I want to say that I oh, what's really interesting about this, I should definitely not forget to tell you this. Okay, so the first guy who died when they were surveying the dam was a guy named I want to say J.G. Tierney. And he died, I want to say it was like might have been like gosh, it would have been like 1923 or something. J.G. Tierney, he's the first guy who dies.
Okay.
The last guy who died 13 years later to the day was named Patrick Tierney, and that was his son.
Oh, yeah, that is weird.
And I want to say they both died on December 20th. You know when December 20th falls in the middle of? A little celebration that the Romans took part in called Saturnalia. And in Saturnalia, they exchanged gifts and they also sacrificed humans. That is, again, does anybody believe in coincidences like that? The first and last guy are literally father and son, and they die the exact same day.
Yeah,
Like,
we
what are
found
literally, like, literally, what are the odds of that?
for sure. We found on a show I was doing, we there was another date associated with the Hoover Dam that lines up with a famous ritualistic time period too. Let me see if I can find it. Um, it was the rites of Ishtar. So check this out. It's a lot of different things involving Easter or Istara or the Easter rituals or the Feast of Venus. It's all in April. It's a very big deal to the ancient world. And the Hoover Dam was completed April 19th, 1931, which lines up with the rites of Ishtar. And this is where it gets really weird. April 19th was also Waco, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Hoover Dam, and Columbine was April 20th, right there too.
Hmm.
So it's like you know what I mean? There's some ritual
Yeah, there's definitely some sacred dates to these people. Like, so
sacred dates.
here's a here's an image in that movie. Are those not the same
Yeah,
angels?
that's the same angels. Yeah.
Like, and they're on the black cubes too.
Oh man, you're right. That's definitely them.
I mean, like, what else is it? I mean, like I said, they're saying something that, like, I don't have to say. Like, I mean, again, that when you do start to look into like the mystery schools, that symbols are their language.
Yeah.
So they're communicating a language that transcends time, it transcends continents. It's they can lie to you with their lips, but they're telling you the truth through those kind of symbols. And I think it's definitely saying something. And I think if
Also, it was
once you know the language, it's like this message is kind of loud and clear.
for sure. Also, it was built during the Great Depression with the FDR administration, and he did a speech there or a ritual, depending on how you look at it, because we know they love their a good opening ceremony to throw out the symbolism and do the ritualistic
Oh, for sure.
rites. Well, FDR, that's the administration that put the pyramid on the dollar bill. He had occultists around him. They'll never hear about this, but FDR's vice president was a guy named, I think it was Henry Morgan, who was working with a well-known occultist of the day named uh I'll come back to you on the name, but basically Nicholas Rourke was the occultist. Nicholas Rourke had a direct line to President FDR, and they were making these decisions on how to do things and when to do things, and even down to like putting the symbology on the dollar bill.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, the Great Seal of America is totally occultic. It's really kind of crazy to think that nobody really fought back against that
Mm-hmm.
because it's totally like a Luciferian type symbol. But that being said, I should say maybe I shouldn't say that in such strong terms because I have recently, the more I've learned, the more I've kind of maybe humbled myself a little bit because I'm saying like that I do think that a lot of symbols have been co-opted. So like maybe certain people wouldn't view like that all-seeing eye as being satanic. Now, I think today it's definitely used that way. Now, but when it comes down to it, it's like that I know a lot of people do view it as the eye of providence. Because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you really think about it, like that I started to wonder like about the pentagram, especially as we do that study into the Testament of Solomon. In that story, the sigil ring, the sigil ring that Solomon has that he's using to control the demons was a pentalpha, so it had a pentagram on it. And so like I think that's why like when you see rituals and you see stuff, especially depicted in the movies, they make a pentagram because a pentagram is some kind of a sigil that helps control or protect you against evil spirits. So that's why like the pentagram today, it's still viewed that way, but it's almost like the idea that in the story, God gives him this thing to protect himself against these angels or these demons and control them. So the power comes from God. It's not from the symbol. But then later people would take the creation of God and use that as some kind of a means of power and control. So if you do think about like the symbol of the pentagram, though, it is a sacred geometric symbol that comes from like you can do a lot more with that shape that turns into the sacred geometry. Because if you look into like the idea like the Fibonacci pattern, like this is a repeating pattern, and this is all connected with things like the pentagram, as like Pythagoras would say, that God spoke things into existence. There's a fingerprint of God everywhere. And the fallen would have known a lot about how God did things, and then they would probably pass things out and kind of cut him cut him out of the story. So they took a symbol that could have been related to a godly symbol, and then they co-opt it, and now it's used for evil. I
Yeah.
mean, the perfect example in like modern times would be that we've seen a lot of us in our own lifetimes have seen the rainbow being co-opted. So like today, would people say, what is this? What is the like if you ask it's sad, if you ask a lot of kids what the rainbow is symbolic of, they would say it's Pride Month, right? As it's Pride Month this month. It means LGBTQ plus or whatever it is today. That's what it means. But we know biblically that the symbol was that God would not destroy the earth by flood anymore. This was a promise. This was a symbol of the promise of God. So now it doesn't mean that. Well, no, it still means that, but people have taken it and they've run with it. And now it's sad because it's like rainbows are cool. I don't think that stuff is cool. I think that, so you know what I'm saying? Like, so you can see how things
Yeah,
could be distorted now versus
yeah,
like what the symbols meant before and what they mean now.
yeah.
Because
Perhaps
the same
swastika.
kind of people have co-op. Yeah, swastika being a perfect example. I think it represents the different seasons when the Big Dipper
The
goes around and
Dipper.
eats it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an
kind of looks
ancient
like
symbol. It
that.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with Germany.
No, no, they commandeered the symbols. Many of the symbols were commandeered by the bad angels and the occult and used. I get what you're saying with the pentagram. That may have been. There's some sort of a power in shapes or
Hmm.
sacred. I don't know how to word it, but there's something about certain shapes that can be used to interact with the spirit realm, apparently. And it's in like a lot of books I've read. They reference that, and some of the occultists, if you look at their personal sigils, if you look at LaVey or Crowley or um, uh, Michael Aquino, all their sigils that they choose to use personally have those sharp angles like you see in a pentagram
Hmm.
and a star or a star, right? There's always some, so there's something to that. But before these guys grabbed the symbol and used it for, I guess, bad magic, it may have been, I don't know, it may have represented something else, that was not bad. And I wasn't Solomon using these symbols to trap demons too?
Yeah, well, I mean, the story goes is that Solomon had this sigil ring and it gave him control over them. Like I said, I think that's obviously
Hmm.
why Solomon's revered. It's like because modern occultists would say that, well, this is how you do witchcraft because like Solomon could get these demons to build the temple and do all kinds of saw up stones and do weird things. Like, I mean, again, this is a apocryphal book. I don't know how much of it's true, but
Oh, it's interesting. That book is really interesting.
well, I think the interesting part about it is like when you talk about like certain shapes have some kind of power.
Yeah.
Well, when you actually see how like star names are written or like planets names are written, not like again, not in English. I'm talking about like their symbols, their sigils. And so what Solomon is doing in that book, he's asking these demons for one, what their name is, what they do, and which angel frustrates them or which star. And so if these demons, if you believe like the book of Enoch, if you believe even Genesis 6, that the angels were these demons' fathers. So there's some kind of there's a hierarchy where the angels have control over literally they could be their offspring. So Solomon's asking what angel frustrates you? And so if you think about it, like if you knew this certain demon was controlled by like the name of his father, well, that's probably why like in your ritual you might put the symbol of his name like on your floor in your ritualistic thing you're doing.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's where that idea comes from. I think that's where like these sacred sigils come from. It's because it's like angels' names because these angels have power. They have
And they
power
had,
over the demons.
yeah, and they had numerology associated with them as well, right? Didn't some of these angels have a number as
Well, I
well?
think yeah. Well, I mean, in the book, it references one Jesus's name in as Emmanuel. It gives the
Manual.
gematria of his name as 644.
Yeah.
So in ancient Hebrew, they take a letter, like a character, and it was associated with a number. So like this was something that they did. So yeah, that's probably where a lot of numerology comes from too, is that these words that could be translated into numeric value. And so I think that's why like these occultists are obsessed with that stuff.
Oh, gematria. Yeah. Isn't there, if I'm not mistaken, in the Testament of Solomon, there were other, you're right. It talks about Emmanuel and the 644, but didn't they talk about some other angels in that book that had numbers too?
Yeah, I believe that they did. I can't remember right off the top of my head. I did think it was interesting. I was look because we were looking this up, me and Josh at the time we were doing the podcast, and like Iesus in gematria was 888.
Okay.
So if you think about Jesus talking about being the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, it's like his name, his like the numeric representation of his name is like kind of infinity. Like eight
Like
eight.
an
Yeah,
infinity
the
symbol.
8 8 is like an infinity symbol.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, there's a lot. This stuff goes pretty deep,
I
but
think that
I
there's something to these many of these symbols and how they equate to numbers and just that book. It makes sense to me. I know that that one's too far out there for probably most people. It just, but
yeah,
I
and
do
I'm
think
okay
that
with people. Yeah, and I'm okay with people like not necessarily trusting it because I don't still don't trust it fully.
oh
The
sure
the thing that I really like about it because it does point everything to back to Jesus at some point. It starts talking about
yeah
that this Messiah that's going to come is going to frustrate all the demons, including the prince of demons. So, but at the same time,
oh they even knew he was coming. The demons knew about
yeah. Well, even in
Jesus.
the
He hadn't been born yet, and they knew that he was going to be.
well, even in the Gospels, when Jesus is casting out demons, they're like, "Oh, Son of Man," and they're like, "You're here, like you're not going to cast us into the abyss now." Well, that's what the Testament of Solomon is alluding to. These demons know that they're going to be cast into the abyss when the Messiah comes, who's not born of a virgin, and it's going to be like a king like no other. So that's why I was like, this is really interesting, like
Yeah,
that it's making these connections, like that. Where do the people get the idea that somebody in this Davidic line is going to have power over demons? Because like people know, like
I think
there is it's alluded to in the Bible, and you probably can't tell. You kind of have to read between the lines. Like the people are like shocked that demons have to listen to Jesus, and then the apostles are blown away that the demons listen to them because they're aware of this demonic phenomenon, but they don't know why. They can't believe that the demons are listening to a person. And so when
sure.
Jesus shows up, that's one of the signs. And where does it say that in the Old Testament? It really doesn't. It doesn't really say that this Messiah that's prophesied is going to be telling the demons what to do. But there's an understanding, there's a knowledge of that, and that is written in the Testament of Solomon. Now, I
Yeah,
think
there's
mainstream theologians would try to tell you that the Testament of Solomon was written way post Jesus, but I do start to wonder if, and I'm not saying I know, I'm just saying that a lot of books that are not in our canon were taken out by people who don't believe in Jesus, the spirit of Antichrist, the rabbis who know that it's pointing to a Messiah. I honestly, that's exactly what I want to say that some of the early church fathers talked about the book of Enoch, that they were saying that it was Christians wrote this because it points to the Messiah and the apocalypse. So nobody had a problem back in the day about the stuff about the angels procreating with women. That was like a thing that was known. Everybody understood that that was what the history was. The Greeks believed that, the Romans believed that, the early Christians believed that, the Jews believed that, Josephus believed that. So nobody threw that book out because of that. They threw it out because it alluded to the Messiah that was crucified by their people.
yeah, there's a very strong thread of prophecy, and I think clearly people knew about the coming prophecies, and even the spirit world seemed to know about the coming prophecies, because
Absolutely.
in the Testament of Solomon there's one demon that he encounters, and he asks the question, uh, who is the angel that frustrates you? And the demon says it'll be the coming Messiah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And his
And
name is Emmanuel, and his number is 644.
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's super
What
fascinating. But I
what
do think that like, and so whether you don't even trust it fully, I do think that sometimes even like I know like a third Enoch, there's some weird stuff about Metatron, which is also weird when you connect that with like the Hoover Dam. There's cubes. You got the
yeah,
Metatron cube
yeah.
in the Transformers movie. Megatron is kept under the Hoover Dam. Megatron, Metatron. So I don't really believe that book is legit, but I do believe that certain people believe that book. And so like sometimes when I read some of these the pseudepigrapha, the apocrypha, like I'm you kind of need to read it with like the idea that you're going to try to like eat here, but you're going to spit out the bones. There could be a lot of things, and like you need to know scripture well enough to know that if it doesn't line up with scripture. But I do believe that there's a lot of people, the powers that be, I think a lot of them actually do believe these books are legit. They act like
Oh,
they do.
oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's this. It's a similar story. It's like with the Satanic Bible. Even it still acknowledges that there's a God and that there's all these other demons. They just try
Hmm.
to change around who the good guy actually is. But it still operates and revolves around the same premise that there's a spirit world and there's angels and demons and there's a God, right? And
Hmm.
do you happen to have that story on you about them trapping the demon Oranius? Ornias?
Um, yeah, I think I could find you like I think I
Or
still
do
have
you
the.
or do you remember it? I
I
just
mean, I remember it
that's
well enough.
super.
Yeah, that's how the book starts. Is that there's this demon called Ornias, and he's like stealing money and food from this kid who's like I want to say he's the son of somebody who's building the temple. And this demon would come to him at dusk or something like it every night and steal from this kid. And this kid was having like a sickness of like withering disease, like he was like wasting away. And then so Solomon asked him like, "What's wrong?" He tells him about this demon, and then Solomon prays to the Most High God, and then through Archangel Michael delivers this ring, and he's saying, "With this thing, you can have control and dominion over these demons." And so he gives this ring to this kid. The kid throws the ring at the demon's chest, and it like freezes him. And now he's saying, King Solomon says, you have to come with me. You have to come to meet with King Solomon. And the demon's like, oh, no, no, no. I'm not going to, I don't want to do that. I can give you all the riches. I can give you all the gold and silver you could ever want. And the kid's like, no, you come with me. And so, like, this is how it starts off, where Solomon starts to question this demon about all the things, the angel that frustrates him. He asks him if he can bring about other demons around, and then eventually he learns about Beelzebul, who's the prince of demons, who's connected with this star called Hesperus, which is like the Greek name for the planet Venus or the star Venus. And so Beelzebul, who can summon all the rest of them because he's the prince of demons. And so yeah, the angel or the one star that he is bound by is like literally like the Messiah. It's like the King
Yep.
of Kings is coming.
Yeah.
So like he has to
Yeah.
listen to him. And so it is interesting. And so like from like a Christian perspective, this is not knowledge that anyone needs because like if you're a Christian, all name Jesus is the name above all names. And that's like the authority that he's given us is like literally that you can bind these demons, you can tell them to flee. Like Jesus didn't give us power and authority in his name to use these demons to build things for us or like get riches from like he tells these things they'll have to flee. They'll have to submit as far
Hmm.
as like casting out of demons and telling them to flee to the abyss. But other than that, like this kind of knowledge is ends up turning into what is like a modern, I think a somewhat modern, like maybe Middle Ages, we're told book called The Lower Keys of Solomon. So there's a big difference between like the Lower Keys and the Testament of Solomon. The Testament of Solomon is more like the story, like the historical type story around this event. Now, the Lower Keys Solomon is like a how-to book on witchcraft.
Right.
And so like there's not the same thing. So yeah, like that literally that's like Kabbalistic magic. That's what that is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it provides a lot of insight into a reality, in my opinion, that there are these other spirits out there that some people have interacted with throughout history. We probably interact with them a lot more than we realize too, even now. This is, but I think it kind of takes out a lot of the stigma of it too. It's like, I mean, you could be super scared of if you lived in a haunted house. I lived in one for a while when I was 13. Maybe that's why I believe so much in this stuff because I saw a black spirit walk out of my room one night after it jumped on
Hmm.
me. It was a very real experience. It's one of the craziest experiences of my life. And it stopped in the doorway and looked at me and it left my room. Like that's real. That happened to me. And I know a lot of people, not many people have that kind of a story or that experience. But for me, it's like, yeah, this helps me demystify that experience some, knowing, okay, yeah, it's a demon. This is what they do. They mess with people. And this has been a problem for a very long time. But
Hmm.
you've got a tool belt as a Christian, and you have the name of Jesus that you can use. And even in the Testament of Solomon, what are the demons saying? We are going to we have to concede to this king who's coming.
Hmm.
One of the ones that was interesting to me in that book was there was a demoness who appeared to Solomon.
Hmm.
She said, I appear to the women who bear my star like a sigil. So
Yeah.
that's what
Hmm.
but she also said she dwelt within the moon.
Yeah,
She's
she
the
was a
moon
connection
goddess.
with the moon. With
And
obviously,
she's
that feminine energy with the moon.
yes, that all that. And she said, I'm um she spoke of a coming king who they would all have to answer to as
Hmm.
well. So they all
Yeah, they
sort
pretty
of
much all do. It's almost like the way that I kind of perceived it as we're studying it is that the lesser demons are bound to certain angels, but the more powerful ones have to submit to only one.
mhm,
Maybe the prince of demons, but everybody, including him, has to submit to the name of Jesus,
yeah.
Jesus or Emmanuel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the moon was the last thing I wanted to actually ask you about. It just dawned on me because you did a reel on that once. And I'm not going to pull it up, but I did a similar thing to your reel where I walked out of a parking lot, walked out of the grocery store one night. I'm in the parking lot and the sun's going down. So the sun's right in front of me. It's going down. I
Mm.
turn to go to my car. And when I get down to my car, I see the moon is out. So it's both. So I'm looking up at the sun on one side, and they're almost like across from each other,
Right.
like
Yeah.
on
Exactly.
opposite sides of the star
Mm.
of the sky. And I'm like, I'm looking at the moon, and the moon is out, but it's like got a shaded crescent part to it, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
It's waxing and
You know,
waning.
like one of these guys right here.
Yeah.
And it should have the crescent should have been on the curve in the crescent should have been the other way
Yeah. Based on the direction of the sun. Yeah.
based on the direction of the sun. And I did this too, where I pulled out my phone and I'm like filming it and I'm like talking, like I'm trying to talk through this and make it make sense. I'm filming the sun and I'm filming the moon. And then I'm like, I never put it out on social media, but I saw like a year later, you've put out like a very similar situation that you filmed. I'm like, we've had the same thought. I've got to talk to him about this because that doesn't make sense.
Well, no, based on what the science says, it should not because yeah, there's nothing obstructing the
Nothing
view.
obstructing.
Like it
Right.
should. I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like what you'd kind of expect to see with like the waxing and the waning of the moon. You'd expect to see more phases, like where you'd almost see like a more gradual thing. But it's like it's very. I mean, it is like a clockwork, like the way that part of the moon is not visible, then part of the moon is visible. Like you would expect, like as the day changes, the way that the moon changes. But I mean, that's the interesting part about like when you can see the moon during the day. Isn't it sort of weird that why is why can when you see through the moon it's blue? Like if it was a solid object like that we're told, like wouldn't you kind of still see the whole wouldn't you see more of it? Like
Mm.
even if it is exposed in the daylight. But it is almost like that the moon is like transparent. And I know that like I want to say like people like Dave Weiss, and I've started to like look into this more. I thought it makes sense is that so we are seeing what the Bible describes as two great lights. We have a greater light to rule the day and a lesser light to rule the night. So, but what we're seeing is like, but we might be seeing a light, but we might not be seeing the source of the light. So if these lights are in the firmament, what if like the light source is coming from outside of it? And that's why like the moon is actually almost like a projection of a light
Mm.
versus an actual light.
I've thought about that too. I've thought about it being, this is wild. This is going to sound super out there, but I thought about it being a space station too, where it's, or it's accompanied by some sort of a space station. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Well, there's all kinds of science fiction where that's actually the case.
Right. Yeah. But it's like how an orbiting shield would create a crescent moon. See what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Like it's got like a shield that orbits it, like it's some sort of technology, like celestial technology that creates like it is a moon. It is a body in this theory. It's like a round ball, but it's got an orbiting. uh, curved shield. A large curved shield blocks sunlight from most of the moon's surface. Only a thin portion remains illuminated, creating a crescent. And then, as the shield orbits, the illuminated portion of the moon appears to change shape. I went deep down this rabbit hole, and then the place where I ended up uh, was this, where the shield doesn't quite look like that, but the shield is a ring of movable occulting panels.
Did you create this? Was this
Yeah,
AI?
I made this
Okay.
with AI. I
Okay, I was gonna
nerded
say
out
like,
and
yeah,
made
you know
this
what?
with
I mean,
AI.
of course, I'm not really a believer in outer space. I don't think that the moon is a physical object. I think it's
Yeah,
a
I feel you. I feel
I
you.
think it's a I think a lot of people have wondered if it's plasma. You know what I find really interesting about that whole phenomenon about the waxing and the waning of the moon is that when you see where you see not maps, but you see flags. Sorry, you're gonna have to shut these dogs.
You're good, man. Yeah. Basically, I had the thought, and I'll let you finish, but I had the thought about what if there's some technology up there that I don't does what it does. You get into like the heavenly host in the Bible, and I think that the host would probably have some sort of a fleet. You'll hear Tim Alberino talk about this, that he thinks that the angels have basically like UFOs, and that sort of
Yeah,
a
I
thing. And so
know,
I was
like me
going
and
down
him,
that.
me and him don't really see eye to eye on that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's like that the angels, that the Bible doesn't say. I know that people talk about in Ezekiel the wheels inside of wheels, but I think what it's describing in Ezekiel, it's talking about like the zodiac. It's talking about the celestial movement of the constellations and the way that the four cardinal points of the zodiac. But no,
By the
no,
way, I
but
can't I can't hear your dogs, by the way.
oh, you can't.
I
Okay,
haven't
but
heard them yet.
so the interesting thing about what I was pointing to is the idea of these flags that are all around the world. You ever seen those flags where a lot of times they have the crescent moon, and sometimes the star is right outside of it, but sometimes the star is in it. And then there's
Mhm.
actually a real phenomenon where people see a waxing and waning moon with the crescent moon, and you can see a star like it's through it.
Okay.
Well, you got two options, right? That it's either you can see through it or the star's in front of it. Either one does
Hmm.
not fit what we're told. Like, but that's a phenomenon that's actually real. There's a lot of weird things about the moon, including like the idea of like the how the eclipses work. I mean, have you ever really looked at like what an eclipse actually looks like? If you pull up pictures of it, you'll never see eclipse look like they show you like when you see all these CGI type images or like these enhanced images of like what it looks like when the moon covers the sun. But the way that when you actually see it happen, it looks almost like the moon does not even exist until it starts to pass over. And as soon as it starts to pass, it like totally disappears, almost like it wasn't even there in the first place. When if you really think about it, and if you think about like a solid object like the moon, you should be able to see it when it moves past. But like during an eclipse, it literally is like this black disc just disappears on the other side of it as it passes over it. And so that one of the reasons I think that biblical cosmology makes more sense than I think that the heliocentric model is the idea of what they call as the selenium eclipse, or what is it, a senile was it senilial eclipse, I believe it's called, what science calls the apostoble eclipse. So this would be like a lunar eclipse where that what we're told is the Earth's shadow starts to cover part of the moon, right? And it's the Earth's shadow, but what they call it, I think the Senilian eclipse is when the sun and the moon are visible in the sky at the same time during this eclipse. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Like kind of almost like what we are talking about, where you have if the sun and the moon are in the same, both in the night sky at the same time, or not the day sky. Well, how is it projecting a shadow from the Earth on top of this on the moon?
Yeah.
Well, that's why they call it the impossible eclipse because it doesn't work. So when you get into like some of these older mythologies and kind of religious type stories about like the ancient Egyptians or even like the ancient Hindus, they believe that there was some other object out there in the cosmos that actually is what's causing the eclipses and not it's not the moon doing it. They believe I wouldn't say in to the Egyptians they called it what do they call it? Apip or something like that. And then
Sure.
the Greeks called that same phenomenon was they called it Apophis. Apophis was this kind of ancient serpent that was trying to swallow the sun disk. And so sometimes it did, but of course Ra always won in the end when
Hmm.
but there was but obviously there's a lot of bad juju when it happens when there's an eclipse. Even biblically, when there's an eclipse, usually bad things are going to happen. When the sun goes dark, it's usually a sign of judgment. But in the Hindu mythologies, they believed in something called Ketu and Ratu, which again was like an ancient serpent. And this was like it was part of the tail and part of the head that one caused, I think, the solar eclipses and one caused the lunar eclipses. But it's some people's belief that there's these dark solar objects that or uh, dark celestial objects that we don't see. And the only time we do see them is when they interact with the great lights in the sky and they block them out.
Incredible, incredible. And I think too, we can start to wrap it up, but I think too that there was a word on the Hoover Dam that means serpent or dragon
Yeah,
too,
Thuban.
right?
Yeah, Thuban. Thuban, I think one I want to say that's one of what they call is that there's I want to say there's three or four dragons, I believe, that are represented in the cosmos. There's like
Yeah.
Draco. I think Scorpio, I want to say, is actually represented as a dragon too. There's like the Hydra up in the constellations. And yeah,
Hmm.
and Thuban, yeah, of course, in that video, I kind of goof on that is that, yeah, Thuban is an Arabic word that means great serpent or dragon. And so it's pointing like right at this like this was like it's a point of reference on this star map. It could just be like kind of coincidental, but I'm making the connections of like this is demonic, like a great serpent or dragon representative like with angels. Is this like are we talking about like the devil, like the dragon, the serpent?
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and I always thought that it was such a weird story that they supposedly got the moon to ring like a bell, like they shot something up there, and
What
there
do
was
they
a
say?
frequency involved.
Yeah, the interesting thing I'm trying to think about the moon. Oh, was when they were like remember when everyone's kind of freaking out about that April 13th eclipse, I want to say it was April 8th. April 8th, was it 2 years ago that people were all freaking out about this
Yeah,
eclipse that was going to happen? And it was
somewhere
going
around there.
over Nineveh and
Yeah, yeah.
blah, 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 and it was doing something weird. Well, that's when NASA had this program called APIP they were shooting like missiles or rockets up at the eclipse. And you're like, what? Like they're naming it after this Egyptian god that causes eclipses, and they're shooting some kind of rockets or something like that at the moon. What are they talking? Like, what is even happening?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
what? I mean,
man, it's
what do you mean you're shooting rockets up at this thing? Like, what is that supposed to do? Like, we're told that what is the moon like 238,000 miles away? What are you shooting
yeah.
anything toward there? Like, what are you going to hit it while there's an eclipse? So like it almost does seem like that they're hinting at that there's something else up there.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of weird mythologies about maybe the sun is some kind of portal.
That's kind of what I was getting at is that they're hinting that there's something up there.
Like there's something more. I want to say even in did you ever see the Lego movie?
No, haven't seen that one.
The Lego movie is if you got kids, it's actually a decent flick. But there's a point in the thing where like Batman and them are like flying in and they're flying out into like the horizon and they're like, oh wait, we're about to go through the sun. And they're like, don't worry. And they bang through the sun and then they get to this place called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is like heaven. So it was like in the movie, like they're intimating like that the sun is a portal.
Yeah, it's in a Pearl Jam song too, where he says there's a window in the sun.
What about I mean, like obviously you have Soundgarden, Black Hole Sun.
That too. There you go.
Yeah, there's like some kind of phenomenon where everyone's getting like the demon faces. And I want to say that was
Mhm.
like almost like the exact same time that everyone was freaking out about the eclipse. There was this phenomenon, like a psychiatric condition where people are seeing demon faces. Some weird
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, it's wild. Yeah, space is a big one, and you know what it is. I know there's a lot of people who think it's all fake. I tend to think that we've been lied to about it for sure. I definitely don't think NASA's telling us the truth about it. But
You don't
some
think
of
they're
the
going to
things,
build a moon base on the moon? It's a NASA guy coming out and saying that.
I know, man. Like what it's almost as if there's a moon, if the moon is actually a ball up there, it's like a that you can land on or whatnot. If that's it's almost like there's something that scared them off. I'm not saying it's real. I mean, there's a lot of options here on the table. I'll just
Well, I mean,
acknowledge that. But
even if you believe in biblical cosmology, it doesn't necessarily preclude the idea that somebody could land on the moon if it was a physical object, because we're talking about something that, we believe is, because flat earthers will tell you they believe the sun and the moon are local. So, I mean, it would almost be more likely that you could get there. Now, the real question
mm,
is it a physical object that could be landed on?
mhm.
So I think that's really the only thing. It's like, what actually is it? I mean, it does seem to be like when you look through a telescope, it does seem to be like a physical rock-like thing.
That's
But what's interesting about the moon is that we only see one side of it.
yeah, I
And you're like,
know.
well,
It's
so why
weird.
doesn't why doesn't it rotate? Well, it does
That's weird.
rotate, but it rotates like this. It rotates like a wheel. Like it
Yeah,
rotates like this. It doesn't rotate
right.
like a
This
spinning object. Like we're seeing one side of it, but it rotates the other way.
I almost wonder if it's whatever it is, it's in another dimension. So it's hard for us to even grasp what's going on up there because it's acting on another like law of physics almost.
Well, it's like we have a three-dimensional perspective, but
Right.
we're only seeing this object in 2D. So we don't even really know what it
Yes.
looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not getting the whole picture of what it actually is. And I think that's why Dave Weiss's theories about some of this stuff was pretty interesting about like, like if you shined a light through like something else, like what would you see? And then there's some really weird kind of theories about it. Like some people talk about the moon being like a projection. It's like that there's this thing that emanates from like somewhere in the middle of the earth that it's like a projection of like the black sun. It's like down in the earth.
I've heard
Now
about
that's
the black
weird. Like I
sun,
said, I mean, who
but
knows? But I don't
I hadn't
think
heard
that.
that one, JT. I hadn't heard that
Yeah, you
one,
have
but
to look
I
that up.
know
Yeah,
I know about the black sun. So I mean I do think that there's a public space program and a private space program. This is my opinion, and I think that the public space program is basically just PR media stunts.
it's uh, it's money laundering.
Yeah, there's probably some of that, but I mean I got into this subject when before I started the show. I got really into the UFO thing and just that whole subject. And there's some very interesting stuff with that. And it seems like even Reagan was trying to start something. Star Wars, right? He's
Oh
trying to
yeah,
create
and of course he
Star
had the famous
Wars,
UN speech about if the world faced an alien
right?
threat, we'd put away our petty differences and we all band together.
And Gorbachev later came out in an interview and said that Reagan asked him about that type of stuff. Like, hey, would you guys help us out if they came down and started a war with us, if the aliens tried to
Oh,
start
and
a war
Nancy
with us?
Reagan was a really weird occultist
Yeah,
too.
she got in, she was a mystic of some, they were
Oh,
doing
definitely,
seances
yeah.
and, like a lot of other first ladies doing
Well, you
seances.
think about
But
Reagan too, is Reagan was he was like from early Hollywood and stuff. Like what kind of stuff did
yeah,
he do and see?
true. Yeah, people forget he was an actor, but he also had a very compelling UFO experience too. He was on a plane with the governor of California, and he looked out the window and saw a UFO. And apparently they had the pilot follow it around for a little bit. And when the plane landed, there was a group of reporters there. I've seen the footage of this.
Mm.
And he got out the plane and he started talking about it. And then it's like he caught himself. He's like, oh, he got excited and he said too much to the
Oh,
reporters.
right.
And you could tell there's a switch that happens. And he's like, oh, I'm not supposed to be talking about this kind of stuff. But you
Oh,
could
I have
tell
to look that up. Do you see you said you
something.
got a video of that?
I've seen it, and I'll see if I can find it for you. Yeah. And it's almost like he realized in the moment, oh, I should not be talking about this. You could tell that something happened to him.
Hmm.
So I'll find the footage and send it to you. But they said that he was Colin Powell in Colin Powell's book said that he was taking all the UFO references out of Reagan's speeches. He was kind of tasked with that because he said that
Can't say that.
Reagan wanted to talk about this, and Colin Powell was tasked with taking him out of his speeches, and he said he was sick the day that he talked about it at the UN. He didn't take it out of the speech.
It was like a big point in the speech, though. But it is funny, and I think a lot of it's so much of it's a psyop, especially all the stuff that they're pushing with this disclosure stuff right now. But I mean, even
Yeah.
just like recently when Obama went on like the most obscure podcast that no one's ever heard of, and the guy asks him about aliens, and Obama says he alludes to the idea that they exist. Well, I haven't seen them though, and the guy has no follow-up questions about that. It was like it's such a just like this seems like such bait.
Yeah.
Like you got Barack Obama of all people on there. You ask him about aliens, and he says he believes they're real, but he's never seen them. The natural follow-up question to that would be, then why do you think that they're real?
Exactly.
If you haven't seen them, like what have you seen? Like what would lead you to believe that? And what did he say that they, yeah, but they're not under Area 51. They're not under some kind of dumbs or whatever. But like, that's really specific that you're getting into that. So what is the
Yeah.
point of like you bringing that up only to shut it down or like to not go into
It,
detail about it? I mean, to me, it does feel like this is bait. This is Fed slop.
yeah, it's like they planned. They planned to have him ask the question and answer it one way only, and then move on with the conversation because it doesn't feel natural. Because, like
Yeah,
you
could you
said, the
imagine if he was on Joe Rogan and he said that? Do you think
oh
Joe Rogan would shut up about it the whole rest of the
no,
podcast?
no, it would have turned into like you need to tell me why you think this probably,
Well, he
unless
never would have
Rogan.
said it on Joe Rogan. I guess that's the whole
No,
point. Is like he said
that's
it on this guy who probably had a list of questions that he could ask and couldn't
That's what I
ask.
think. And look at what's happening this year. You said already you've got all this disclosure stuff. You've got the Spielberg movie
Hmm.
that's in the works coming out, and also Obama has a Netflix series that he's been working on for like 2 years now about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's in behind the scenes. He's a part of the whole disclosure team. I think.
Well, I mean, that, well, you know what? I was just thinking that would make sense if you were promoting that show too, is if you would, like, you have
You would
him of
say
all
that.
people to talk about aliens. Now, you would
Yeah.
think that you would probably try to coordinate it closer to when the show was coming out, but that is interesting that if he is working on something like that. But yeah, I definitely feel like that the whole Spielberg thing, this coordination and all the stuff that's getting ratcheted up, it's like you're hearing it on Fox News and congressional hearings. Yeah, like this movie coming out, they're gonna say something through this for sure. I
I
mean, I
saw the
plan on seeing it.
trailer. I saw the trailer, and
The
there's
trailer
a
is so creepy, and it does. I mean, from like a Christian
the
guy, like it really does ring like this is demons. Like this, they're not even trying to hide. Like this sounds totally demonic. Like the clicking and the weird things
that
speaking
does.
through that reporter.
Did you see the version of the trailer where they spliced in little portions of an interview with Spielberg? Where it's
Mm.
like, okay, there's a version of the trailer where they show the trailer, they show all the aliens and the clicking and stuff, but then there's a couple spots in there where they show him in the interview, and he's just chilling, and he's saying something like, "Whenever I made Close Encounters back in the '70s, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if any of this was true?" And he goes, and now I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if the American people realized it is true?
Yeah, he's. I mean, obviously, that dude has done nothing but pump out propaganda movies for like the last 30, 40 years. If you guys can
Oh,
take pick which ones which propaganda he's putting out, but yeah, if you really think about it, like Spielberg of all people, I really do think other than like Crowley with the lamb illustration, I think that is where people get the idea of what gray aliens look like from Close Encounters. You know, he had like the
yes, I
little
agree.
ones, he had the tall, slender ones.
I
So it's
agree.
like that's a very specific type of image of an alien, and that's it's funny. Like even as kids, I think that they talked about little green men, little green aliens, but then sometime they shifted, and nobody really talks about green aliens anymore, other unless they're talking about insectoids or reptilians or something. But what those kind of big-eyed, bulbous head-looking aliens come from, it comes from Spielberg.
Mm-hmm. Close
So then when people
Encounters.
see that kind of a thing, and I mean they are kind of insectoid looking, but They're
And he
totally weird, and
was,
I think it's very specific. I think it's very specific, and I think it does come
yeah,
from guys like him.
yeah, he's in the camp. The space, it's green aliens. They're from outer space, and it's he had J. Allen Hynek working with him during the making of that movie. J. Allen Hynek was the Air Force Project Blue Book guy who went around and looked at UFO cases for the government for the longest time.
Hmm.
So he had these government guys on his in his ear when he made Close Encounters.
He's like I said, he's been involved with all those guys the whole time, I think.
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, man. We'll wrap it up. Any predictions about that before we wrap up? What do you think?
No, I really don't have any. I mean, I said so we're like a week away from the movie coming out. I'm definitely going to
Yeah.
check it out. I'm going to see what they're going to see, but I do think that there's a lot of the merger of like people like podcasters like me talking about this being more of a demonic phenomenon. I would say
Hmm.
that there does feel like there's more of a merger the way that people are kind of presenting this idea that these things are not from outer space necessarily, they're from a different dimension. Sounds a lot like even like the Tucker Carlsons of the world talking about these things are already here, that nobody sees them come down from outer space, they appear over the ocean or they come from the ocean, historically, or like through like a biblical lens, like the deep is associated with hell. So I do start to wonder, like, that as these kind of messages start to combine, is that what they're going to kind of show us in this movie? Is that maybe they're going to try to present the idea that the demons are not demons, they're aliens. Maybe it's like the opposite. Like they're going to turn
Right.
this on its head. It's like that these spiritual beings are not spiritual, they're actually an alien race from a different dimension.
Yeah, a species that presents itself to be a threat to us. Maybe
But
you
there's actually some nice ones. That's what they'll probably say.
they'll do that too.
There's some
And
evil ones, there's some nefarious ones, but there's also some good ones.
there's going yeah, because those are some of the factions you see out there running the ball down the court in this whole disclosure thing. It's like you've got Greer who says they're not a threat, and we can use CE5 protocol and talk to them and be friends with them and use them to sort of move humanity forward in a positive way. And then you've got the I guess the Lou Elizondo crowd who believes that they present a threat, but
Hmm.
beneath that is this whole military industrial complex give us money thing.
Right, right. That
So
one makes sense. Is like trust. I mean, that's the straight up as like the William E. Cooper book about Behold the Pale Horse, is that certain government factions are going to use this to try to consolidate more power and control for protection. That seems
yeah,
like the more likely route. But I mean, you could imagine though, from like a Greer being more of like a new age type perspective, that he's going to say that no, that actually there's some nice ones.
mhm,
So both stories are going to be a lie.
yeah,
So like if you're finding yourself anywhere in the middle of those two things, it's like take away my freedom, protect me, give me money. Don't listen to that, and also don't listen to the people that says, "Oh, actually, some of these aliens are nice." You ever watched E.T.? Yoda. Some of them are pretty wise, and some of them are nice. No, man, those things are even Yoda is straight out of like a I forgot what is like Mephistopheles. So he's drawn in some of these old Freemasonry books
oh
where
yeah,
he's like a straight up demon.
I saw that. Yeah,
It's
they
like
got
so
yeah,
like so George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, like they are making what we know today as to be what aliens would be looking like, and they're coming straight from Crowley and straight from like these Freemasonry books that are talking about demonology.
yeah.
Like what I'm saying, like so
I get it. Yeah,
there, as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. They're probably getting a lot of these names from the Testament of Solomon too.
yeah. That I think that connection is certainly there. The what I'll just term it the old God connection, but basically the entities, the principalities, even that are mentioned in the Bible, I think possibly are connected to the UFO phenomenon.
Oh yeah,
That's
well you think about it again. Go back to Crowley. What he said. He's the one who like basically gives us, other than the lamb had like beady little eyes and didn't have like the bulbous eyes. I mean, other than that, he looked just like what you would see depicted as a gray alien. And he's the one who famously said, "Today we call them angels and demons. There's going to be a time where people are going to start calling them something else."
and
And so now we're
that
like now we're living in that time.
All right. And that showed up at a CE5 meeting. I've seen the pictures. I had a guy on named Chad Riley. He makes documentaries. Uh, he's a Christian guy. He's got a lot of good information. And he showed me a picture at that these people were at one of Greer's CE5 meetings, and something started floating around. They saw like an apparition or something, and they got the pictures out or phones out, took a picture of it. And in the picture, they caught this entity looking at them, and it's lamb.
Oh wow, that's
It's the
creepy.
same. It's the same. It looks like a real version of lamb because lamb is a drawing, so it's kind of
Hmm.
cartoonish, I guess, or whatever
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that sense. This looks like that in real life.
yeah.
It's the
That's
same.
creepy.
It's the same thing. So yeah, just I thought that was a weird connection.
Yeah, I think the last thing I have to say about that is just that I do think that if this is a demonic phenomenon, which I believe it is, I think the more belief and the more fear that's instilled through this does actually give them power. And I really do think that's the idea of like when you get real freaked out in your house and you think that it might be haunted, I think it can be haunted by your belief in that. It's like you're giving access to this idea, this belief in it does it's like a Loosh thing, right? Is that they're kind of energy vampires, and like so through your energy and through your fear, this thing can manifest more real. And it is.
Mm-hmm.
I do think like that's the idea of like revelation of the method. Duper's delight is like that they're kind of telling you, and then you're putting a lot of stock in faith into this. And I think that through that, yeah, it's only leads to more deception. So I just think that again, like we said, that Jesus is the name above all names, and
Yep.
they all have to submit.
For sure. That's a good place to land it. Yeah, even the spirits, even the demons and the demonesses know, according to some of these old texts, who the king is. Who,
Amen.
yeah, amen. So, hey, I appreciate you. What you hung out with me for a while today, and I'll say this: that was a real quick. I don't know if it's like 2.5 hours or something. That was a real quick 2.5 hours, man.
Yeah, that was good.
I mean, like,
Good
wow.
conversation. Always a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
conversation with you, Tim.
Oh, always, brother. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, once again, JT follows JC over on YouTube. You look up JT's mixtape on Apple or Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you listen to podcasts. JT follows JC on X, Instagram, TikTok, Joe Telford over on Facebook. You find me any place, you can pretty much find me everywhere. So yeah, please
Cool,
check
man.
out my channel.
Cool. Okay. Well, everybody, this was great. Appreciate you once again. Everybody, check the description below. You can go and find the link for all JT's stuff. Go check out his work. Go check out his Solomon series. It's awesome. And until next time, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.